A beautiful blonde-haired woman is remembered with a somber thought. Her very birth was considered a crime. A little red-haired girl stares at a portrait of her mother, the celebrated son of the Alvin family, who died giving birth to her. Immediately after her birth, the girl was sent to live in isolation in a lonely annex. A stern maid with dark hair and a bun scolds the young red-haired girl, demanding she sit up straight. The maid viciously raises a rod to strike the girl, screaming that she is a monster as blood spatters. The little red-haired girl collapses to the floor in pain. The maid, once a loyal servant to the girl's mother, channeled her grief into hatred for the child she blamed. The maid cruelly informs the girl that her father's first order upon her birth was to never see her again. One day, desperate for his attention, the bruised and crying girl ran to her father, hoping he would finally see her pain. Her red-haired father turns back with a cold glare, demanding to know what she is doing. Without a shred of emotion, he orders a subordinate to take her back to the annex, crushing her hopes. In that moment of utter rejection, she gave up, realizing that hope only ever led to more hurt. Huddled and injured in the snow, a new resolve forms. At 13, she would join the military. Years later, her father sits at his desk as a soft click announces someone's arrival. A grown woman with the same fiery red hair stands before him, formally greeting her father after a long time. Her father looks up with cold indifference, curtly asking what she wants. The red-haired woman stands her ground, her expression unreadable. Her father scoffs, sarcastically asking if she expects him to throw her a party. She announces her decision to join the military, catching him by surprise. A vision of her smiling blonde-haired mother appears, her words echoing a desire to speak. The woman's face momentarily transforms, taking on the gentle likeness of her mother amidst a cascade of white flowers. Her father stares in shock, seeing his late wife in his daughter's face and crying out, "Priscilla?" Priscilla confronts him directly, accusing him of abandoning her and then acting like the victim. She looks away with cold certainty, reminding him that he stood by and let all the abuse happen. With a small, knowing smile, Priscilla asks her father if he is aware of what the scriptures say. She quotes from a holy book, reminding him that scriptures say parents should love their children. Her father grits his teeth in anger, demanding to know what she is trying to say. Placing a white flower in a vase, Priscilla recounts how he shut her away and ignored her suffering. She questions whether a man who abandoned his child deserves to reunite with the mother who died protecting her. With final, cutting words, Priscilla declares that he will never see her mother again, not even in the afterlife. A single tear falls as she turns away, her painful farewell complete. A carriage departs, carrying Priscilla away from her past and down a long country road. She arrives at her destination, a massive, imposing military fortress. Here, among barrels of training swords, only one thing mattered: strength. Surrounded by a vision of blooming roses, Priscilla affirms her new path with a confident yes. As Priscilla approaches a table with a crystal orb, a nearby man questions the arrival of a mere kid. Realizing it's a magic test, she calmly places her hand on the glowing sphere. An immense pillar of light erupts from the orb, radiating unimaginable power. The magical blast is so intense that it sends two nearby men flying backward through the air. An officer exclaims at her incredible magic, immediately declaring she will be placed in the Magic Knights. Priscilla finds the merit-based system of the military a welcome change, proving her worth in a duel. The grueling physical training was far easier for her to endure than the crushing neglect she suffered at home. 8 years later, Priscilla stands tall and confident, having earned the rank of captain in the Magic Knight Division. Captain Priscilla stands in her office, presiding over two of her subordinates. Reading an official dispatch, she reacts in shock. They are sending her the third prince. Her knights gossip behind her, one mocking her apparent fear while the other notes the order came directly from the queen. Priscilla's expression hardens with worry and frustration over the unexpected assignment. The dispatch describes Theobald Christian, an illegitimate prince born to a maid who died because she couldn't handle his immense magic. Since his tragic birth, Prince Theobald has lived a life of solitude, hidden away from the world with no one to rely on. As her knights look on, the red-haired captain reviews the prince's file, noting his magic attributes are unlisted. One of her subordinates explains that the prince possesses strong magic, but lacks any control over it. She wonders why they would recklessly send someone so dangerous to the Magic Knights, questioning if they even care if he dies. With newfound resolve, she looks up and declares, "I'll take him in." The scene shifts to the exterior of the formidable stone fortress, where the prince will begin his new life. Surrounded by an ethereal glow of yellow flowers, the young, silver-haired Prince Theobald arrives, his expression somber. The red-haired captain introduces herself as Patricia Alvin, announcing that she will be his captain from now on. Prince Theobald simply stares back at her, his expression unreadable and his silence unnerving. He turns his back on her completely, dismissing her introduction with a cold shoulder. Unfazed, Patricia smirks with amusement at his rudeness, while her subordinates gasp in shock. Stepping closer, she gently cups his face in her gloved hands, forcing him to look at her. Blushing and flustered by the sudden touch, Theobald stammers, asking what she thinks she's doing. Patricia offers him a soft, almost tender smile, her gaze locked on his. Then, with surprising force, she pinches and stretches his cheeks, much to his shock. The moment of gentle connection is shattered by her playful aggression. Ow, ow, ow. She lets go, and the force sends him stumbling backward onto the ground in pain. Scrambling up, he demands to know what that was for, but Patricia chides him for his rude words. He angrily reminds her of his royal status, but she dares him to go complain to the king. She taunts him with a whiny, mocking impression of him snitching to his father, startling him into silence. Patricia correctly deduces he can't complain because he's only here because he dared not disobey a royal order. His defiance crumbles, and Theobald looks down, his expression turning to one of quiet resignation. Observing him, Patricia realizes he doesn't seem angry, but rather profoundly lonely. A flashback reveals the harsh reality for illegitimate royals, who are often ignored or simply disappear. She surmises that he must live in constant fear, possibly even suspecting she's an assassin sent by the queen. Trapped by the royal command, Theobald has no choice and nowhere else to go. Leaning close, Patricia asserts her authority, telling him that as his captain, his life is now in her hands. Theobald looks up, resigned to his fate, and asks what she wants him to do. With a brilliant smile and a peace sign, she cheerfully orders him to run 20 laps, leaving him utterly speechless. Patricia leads the run with a smile, warning him to get moving or things will only get harder. She narrates that she treated him like any other recruit as he struggles to keep up, muttering for her to shut up. He falters during the run, but she internally vows to drag him back if he ever tries to escape. During a grueling late-night training session, she relentlessly pushes him to repeat his drills. An overhead view shows the vast, empty training grounds of the fortress. Finally pushed beyond his limits, Theobald's hand gives out, and he collapses onto the dusty ground. Patricia stands over his exhausted form, her arms crossed as she impassively watches him. She admits to herself that the prince is tougher than she initially thought. Later, she tells the panting prince he needs more stamina, but he retorts that they're all insane. She explains that endurance is essential for survival, while he collapses, muttering that they are all monsters. As dusk settles over the fortress, a gentle breeze blows through the courtyard. Theobald lies on the ground, completely spent from the day's training. Patricia stands over him in the sunset, promising to make him so strong no one can ever take anything from him again. Lying on the ground, he looks up at her, absorbing her powerful words with a glimmer of hope. With a smirk, she adds that they will also make all the snobs who look down on him regret it. A genuine smile finally breaks through his somber demeanor as he agrees enthusiastically. Patricia shares that when she joined, she was mocked for being a woman, but silenced everyone by beating them up. She claims training clears the mind, but Theobald mutters it's just because her brain turned to muscle. Strength is power, she declares proudly, to which he calls her a muscle-brained noble with a horrible mindset. She cheerfully continues that her muscles have given her some good ideas. With a wistful, vengeful smile, she reflects that she should have destroyed her family's estate before enlisting. Hearing her shockingly brazen remark, Theobald bursts into a bright, unrestrained laugh for the first time. Theobald asks Patricia to stop calling him Your Highness and to just call him Theo, like everyone else. Looking determined, Patricia promises to do her best, but still formally addresses him as Captain Patricia. Wah! Patricia praises him with a very good and pats his head, causing a flustered Theobald to blush. A montage shows Theobald's grueling training, from sit-ups and running to intense sword practice. While he still couldn't use much magic, he had learned to infuse his sword with a small amount of power. During training, Patricia notes that Theobald's magic is now almost as strong as her own. Theobald reflects that magic isn't everything, and suggests they try to figure out which element suits him best. On a sunlit balcony, Patricia and Theobald face each other with swords drawn, ready for a sparring match. Theobald looks at her with fierce determination, demanding she stop holding back and fight him for real. With a confident smile, Patricia accepts his challenge, telling him to bring it on. Theobald lunges forward, launching a swift attack against his unflappable captain. As they spar, Patricia reflects that training the stubborn and honest prince is like having a little brother. She smiles fondly, thinking how he always challenges her, even though he never wins. After their match, Patricia bids him farewell until tomorrow as a weary Theobald thanks her. Another knight approaches the prince, disdainfully questioning if he's really okay taking orders from a woman like that. Theobald glares at the man and coldly asks if he thinks he could beat their captain. The knight nervously declines, so Theobald suggests he challenge her to a duel if he has a problem with her. Leaping away with a newfound confidence, Theobald declares he has nothing to complain about when it comes to Captain Patricia. Overhearing his staunch defense, Patricia smiles to herself, thinking how cheeky he's become. Patricia narrates that as Theobald began to care for her, she started to see him and the squad as family. She reflects that her time in the military was the happiest of her life, until the memory shatters like broken glass. The scene shifts back to the present, where a subordinate addresses Captain Patricia Alvin in her office. He delivers a shocking royal order from His Majesty. Her squad is being sent to the front lines. A close-up shows Patricia's wide, disbelieving eye as she processes the terrible news. She internally questions the sudden and shocking command, wondering what the hell is going on. A close-up reveals the formal, signed and sealed scroll containing the royal order. The subordinate repeats the royal order, confirming that Patricia's entire squad is being deployed to the front. Patricia mentally reviews the political situation, noting that while the border with the Kingdom of Alicia is tense, there have been no real signs of war. Reading further, she is horrified to discover they are being ordered to cross the border and attack first. Her face pales as she realizes the grim truth. This is basically a death sentence for her and her squad. Patricia addresses her squad, explaining that as nobles, none of them ever expected to be sent into a real battle. She gravely informs them of their reckless mission to wipe out Alicia's border troops and push into their territory. A knight erupts in anger, demanding to know why their specific squad is being sent on this suicide mission. Clenching her fist, a pained Patricia states that they must obey because it's His Majesty's command. She announces they leave in 3 days and warns them not to breathe a word of the mission to anyone. Walking away, she somberly advises them to use their remaining time to be with their loved ones. The other knights react with despair and disbelief, while Theobald stands silently, watching Patricia leave. A close-up shows Theobald's face, his expression somber and filled with unspoken worry. The scene transitions to a quiet night, with a full moon shining brightly in the sky. Patricia sits alone in the moonlight, lamenting that she has no one, no friends or family, to say goodbye to. Theobald appears before her, framed by glowing blue flowers, his presence a quiet comfort in the night. He sits beside her on the wooden crate and gently asks if they can talk for a moment. Looking at her with grave seriousness, Theobald asks the question weighing on his mind. This is because of me, isn't it? Patricia knows saying yes would crush him, but realizes it would be a lie to say no. With a look of resignation, Theobald asks if they are being sent to the front lines just to die. Patricia recalls their unspoken fear. The Queen is trying to eliminate Theobald now that he's a stronger magic knight. The Queen's cruel plan is clear. Use the noble sacrifice of a lowborn royal to justify a war. With renewed resolve, Patricia looks at Theobald and makes a solemn vow. Theo, we're going to survive this. A fierce smile lights up her face as she promises they will outlive every single person who tried to throw them away. Theobald smirks back, a spark of defiance in his eyes, and declares that if he outlives them all, it will make him king. Ha ha ha, laughing, Patricia agrees, telling Theo she wouldn't mind seeing him become the king. She leans against him, musing that someone like him, who knows real suffering, would make a good king. But her narration ominously concludes that things never go that smoothly. The scene abruptly shifts, heralded by a sudden, sharp sound. In a flashback to the battlefield, Patricia and Theobald fight for their lives, as she recalls how their squad was nearly wiped out after crossing the border. Gah. As they retreat across the blood-soaked ground, a fellow knight is struck down by an arrow. Amid cries of ah and nu, Patricia grimly realizes she knew this would happen. She declares they've reached their limit and must fall back, but a voice from behind coldly forbids it. A gay knight reports a horrifying order for them to fight until they're dead before being slain by a supposed ally's glowing sword. As her own men turn on each other, Patricia realizes with dawning horror that they were nothing more than disposable pawns. Patricia steps forward, ordering her remaining panicked soldiers to retreat while she takes responsibility and prepares a counterattack. Suddenly, she senses an incoming wind bullet from the direction of their allies, wondering if it's a misfire. Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes the attack isn't a mistake. It's aimed directly at Theo. As Theobald turns in surprise, Patricia narrates that the Queen made sure he wouldn't leave the battlefield alive. Desperate to save him, Patricia races across the battlefield, pleading to get there in time. She shoves Theobald aside, just as the lethal magic is about to strike him. NNGH. Gritting her teeth, Patricia intercepts the blast, taking the full force of the attack herself. Thrown to the ground, Theobald looks back in horror and screams, "Captain!" Patricia collapses onto Theobald, her body limp. A close-up reveals Theobald's face, frozen in shock and terror. Kneeling over her bleeding form, Theobald desperately begs his captain to stay with him. Tears stream down Theobald's face as he's overwhelmed by grief and helplessness. With her dying breath, Patricia touches his cheek, urging him to live and make their enemies regret what they've done. "No!" He cries out her name in anguish, clutching her bloody hand to his face. Patricia's last thought is a selfless wish for her dear subordinate to survive. In the desolate aftermath, Theobald kneels alone over Patricia's body. Gently touching her face, he whispers, "It's okay, Captain." A new resolve hardens his expression as he promises he'll think of something. A new memory surfaces. He can use healing magic. He recalls that healing magic is looked down upon, especially for a royal, which is why he kept it a secret. A brilliant golden light erupts as he vows to pour all his saved-up magic into this one spell. He channels the powerful healing energy into Patricia, willing to die if it means saving her. Theobald holds Patricia close, a blood stain on his face as a gentle light and a bed of flowers envelop them. Later, soldiers arrive to survey the battlefield, littered with the bodies of fallen knights. An officer laments the waste of such a talented unit, assuming the third prince was killed in the ambush. Another man notes that the queen's cruelty knows no bounds and that the king is merely her puppet. A soldier rushes in with shocking news. They found a survivor. The officer finds a wounded but alive Theobald and helps him to his feet. Patricia awakens in a field of flowers, hearing a faint voice ask, "Child?" "Oh!" Her vision slowly clears on an unfamiliar chandelier. A young woman and a boy peer down at her, surprised to see she's finally awake. Awakening in a bed surrounded by children, Patricia watches as the boy runs off to get the director. Two small children ask if she's okay, and she answers that she's fine. Touching her throat, she's stunned by her high-pitched voice and the sight of her own small hands. The vision is punctuated by a flash of white flowers. Holding a hand mirror, Patricia panics, shouting that she's younger and demanding to know what happened to her. A nun approaches, explaining that they were worried because Patricia had been asleep for 3 days. She reveals that the army found Patricia collapsed near the border and brought her to a large estate. Patricia looks down, deeply troubled and confused by her impossible new reality. Patricia's final memory of her past life is of dying in the war, leaving her to question her current youthful form. Her first and most urgent thought is for Theobald, desperately wondering if he's okay. She concludes that her father and brother have likely forgotten her and that she now has no one. A hand gently pats her head, startling her from her somber thoughts. She realizes that her survival might be a problem for the military, who likely wanted to erase all evidence of the failed mission. Lying in bed, surrounded by flowers, a new understanding begins to dawn on her. She sits up and urgently asks the nun what happened to the war. Though she looked like a 7-year-old, she was mentally 24 and quickly became a dependable caregiver for the younger orphans. The war had made the poor orphanage's situation even worse, leaving the children constantly hungry. With barely enough food to go around, she is shown sharing her meager meal with a younger boy. She reflects that the country must be in a terrible state for children to be starving like this. The narration grimly states that war and poverty always crush children first, with many dying on the streets. After a year of hardship, the war finally reached a ceasefire. The director assures the children they are safe, but Patricia notes there was no official notice. The fighting just stopped. Despite the ceasefire, a steady stream of new orphans arrived, pushing the struggling orphanage to its breaking point. Holding a sleeping child, Patricia feels helpless, wondering what she can possibly do in her small body. Two children rush over, calling her Patty and excitedly telling her that the director has a visitor. The boy adds that the visitor looked extremely rich, piquing Patty's curiosity. The three of them walk together across the grounds of the estate. As they approach, Patty's face pales with sudden, abject horror. She recognizes the visitor as her father, a man she hasn't seen since she left home years ago. He turns his head sharply. his gaze locking onto her from a distance. He asks the director about Patty, and the nun explains she is one of the war orphans they recently took in. The nun praises Patty's responsible nature, but Patty worries about what to do, feeling trapped. A wave of defiance washes over her as she decides she wants nothing to do with him. As the nun gently chides her for being rude, Patty grows more frustrated. Her father continues to stare at her, a thoughtful and unreadable expression on his face. She flinches under his gaze, wondering if he thinks she's the ghost of his dead daughter. He suddenly reaches out toward her and she stumbles back in alarm. Looking down at her, he sternly asks what's going on. He then makes a stunning announcement to the director. He wants to adopt this child. Horrified, Patty thinks he must be joking and vows not to return to that house, questioning his motives. She looks up at her father and pleads with him to choose someone else. Although being adopted by a noble is the best possible outcome for an orphan, she refuses to go back to that place. Her father counters with a powerful offer. If he adopts her, he'll ensure the orphanage is properly funded. Both the nun and Patty are shocked into silence by his proposal. He agrees to the deal very well, adding that he'll personally oversee the distribution of the funds. Surrounded by an aura of white flowers, Patty feels the weight of her decision and finally agrees to go. Internally, she admits she doesn't want to, but she won't risk the other children's lives over her old grudge. With the adoption arranged, a carriage arrives to take her away from the orphanage and her friends. Dressed in a new gown, she takes a hesitant step forward, looking up at what awaits her. She narrates her return to the grand estate she swore she would never enter again. Her father waits for her in the sunlit garden of the mansion. He gently pats her head, but she remains suspicious, wondering if he's using a lookalike to torment her. She resolves to use her magic and run away if he tries anything suspicious. To her complete shock, he suddenly lifts her into a warm, tight hug. Huh? She looks up at him, utterly confused by this unexpected show of affection. Overwhelmed with emotion, her father holds her close and begins to sob uncontrollably. The scene shifts to Theobald, now a powerful figure in a royal cape, as Patricia narrates that she didn't yet know the whole story. Patricia stares in utter shock, her mind reeling from the revelation. She glances from a large framed portrait of her adult night self to her own small reflection, completely bewildered. Her father praises the portraits of his wife and daughter, but Patricia internally scorns his words, believing it's all an act to cover his past neglect. Clenching her fist, she silently dismisses his behavior as a pathetic performance of mourning for a child he never truly cared about. Feigning a smile, she asks if he adopted her because she resembles his late daughter. Thinking it's a common story to gain sympathy, he confirms her suspicion, admitting she reminded him so much of his daughter that he couldn't leave her in the orphanage. She internally scoffs at his reasoning, knowing she was far more miserable in his house than she ever was as an orphan. Her father places his hands on her shoulders, looking down at her with a gentle smile. He promises to make the rest of her life happy, but her expression remains distant and uncertain. As he leads her away to eat, she struggles to understand how he can love a lookalike when he couldn't love his real daughter. Seated before a grand feast, Patricia looks overwhelmed by the sheer amount of food laid out for her. Her father smiles warmly, encouraging her to take her time and eat as much as she'd like. While the huge portions are a shock compared to the orphanage, she has to admit the food looks delicious. Suddenly, a red-haired young man bursts into the dining room with a loud crash. The man's green eyes blaze with fury as he takes in the scene. He points directly at Patricia, demanding to know who she is. Her father calmly introduces her as his new stepsister, prompting her to think that she's technically been his sister for 24 years. The young man gestures sharply, clearly in disbelief over the sudden announcement. A close-up shows his simmering anger as he glares ahead. Patricia looks down sadly, assuming her father adopted her without telling her brother, and that she's now a burden to him. Her brother slowly approaches and leans down to get a closer look at her. To her surprise, he smiles gently amid a shower of flowers, introduces himself as David, and welcomes her. Patty gives a formal bow, promising not to cause any trouble. Her father smiles, telling her there's no need to be so formal and to just act like herself. Sitting alone, Patricia quietly wonders why they are suddenly being so kind to her. She is presented in a beautiful new frilly dress, looking like a proper young lady. David suggests a softer color might suit Patty better, and their father thoughtfully considers his son's fashion advice. Standing in a room filled with new clothes and gifts, a stunned Patty can only offer a hesitant thank you. Her family encourages her not to be shy, as she is now a lady of the Alvin family, a title that is finally starting to feel real to her. She grimly recalls the cruel head maid who blamed her for her mother's death, and the butler who always looked at her with disgust. In stark contrast to her memories, two maids now greet her with bright, welcoming smiles. She reflects on how different things are now, as they eat together and her family actually listens to her. Over tea, she cautiously addresses her brother as Lord David. He looks over, and she shyly corrects herself, calling him Big Brother for the first time. Hearing this, her father looks up from his teacup, visibly stunned and moved. A collection of presents, including a teddy bear and a necklace, symbolizes the family's acceptance. Posing for a new family portrait, she feels like the dream she once had as a lonely little girl is finally coming true. Sometime later, a slightly older Patricia walks through the gardens in riding clothes, looking confident. She spots her father and David talking together in the distance. When she sees them looking up at her old portrait, she instinctively ducks behind a pillar to hide. David asks his father if he is certain Patty isn't his biological daughter, given her striking resemblance to Patricia. Her father states that he only ever loved her mother, so it's impossible for him to have a child with another woman. David suggests she might be a forgotten relative, while Patricia fumes in her hiding spot, frustrated they can't see the truth. Her father wonders aloud if God sent Patty to them as a chance to atone for their past sins. A vision of her mother appears in a mirror, her voice questioning if God would truly grant them a second chance with the woman who died protecting her child. Her father confesses to David that Patricia hated him because she was a constant reminder of his late wife. David looks down with regret, admitting that Patricia was innocent and that he was a foolish and sinful child. The father laments that he could have discovered the truth about the servant's abuse if he had just asked, but now it's too late to fix his mistakes. Overhearing their conversation, Patricia is stunned to realize her father never ordered her mistreatment, and that must be why the old staff is gone. She finally understands that after she left the house, her family discovered the servants' cruelty and fired them all. Her father tries to stop Theobald, pleading that Patty is just a child, but the silver-haired man simply asks, "Oh?" Theobald reminds him that Captain Patricia joined the military at only 13, causing both her father and brother to flinch. He coldly points out the hypocrisy of sending his real daughter to battle while hesitating to send his adopted one to the safe royal palace. With a chilling expression, Theobald looks down and declares the entire situation strange. Her father and David look down in shame and regret, unable to answer his sharp accusation. Patricia looks up at the imposing man, quietly saying his name, Theo. She recalls how furious Theo used to get when she, as Captain Patricia, would tell him about her neglectful family. Back in the present, Theo turns his attention to her, asking if her name is Patty. He explains that serving as a lady-in-waiting will be a good opportunity to learn manners and prepare for marriage. Her expression falls as she understands the truth of her situation. She is a hostage, a test of the Alvin family's loyalty. She knows she can't refuse, fearing what Theo might do to her family given his past knowledge of their cruelty. In a moment of quiet reflection, she admits that before, she never cared what happened to them. But now, having finally been loved by her father and brother, she admits she was truly happy. Steeling her resolve, she decides to protect the happiness she has finally found. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit view of the royal palace. Now dressed in a simple maid's uniform, Patricia nervously holds a wash basin. She laments that since all the other court ladies refused the task, she is the only one left to handle it. Rushing down a long, opulent hallway, she calls out for His Majesty. She peeks through a curtain, realizing the outrageous privilege of being allowed to enter the king's private chambers unannounced. With a bright smile, she throws open the curtains to wake the king, wishing him a good morning on a beautiful day. Theobald groans, shielding his eyes from the sudden burst of light. She thinks to herself that most of the staff are too afraid to wake him, often delaying morning affairs. Rubbing his eyes, he tiredly remarks on how energetic she is again today. She beams, cheerfully replying that she has always been a morning person. Sitting up, Theo smirks slightly, noting that she truly isn't afraid of him. She offers a gentle, knowing smile in response to his observation. He reaches out and gently takes her hands in his. A golden light suddenly glows from their clasped hands. Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes her chapped skin has been instantly healed. She stares at him, wondering if Theo's specialty has been healing magic all along. A flashback narrates that as a prince with no offensive magic, Theo was looked down upon, as healing was considered a woman's role. He kept his talent hidden until he came up with an idea to weaponize his healing magic. Because healing magic manipulates the human body, she realizes it can be used not only to heal, but also to destroy. He developed his rare skill to such a degree that he can now stop a human heart, the true reason people fear him. Theo looks on with a calm, confident expression, his power now fully realized. Patty reasons that unlike the cruel former king, Theo is kind and would never kill without a reason. Because she wasn't afraid of him, she found herself assigned nearly all the work related to him. Overwhelmed, she clutches her head, realizing the job in the royal palace is far from the easy work she imagined. A kind-looking man with light brown hair appears, introduced as Roland, the king's close aide. Patty smiles, explaining that she actually enjoys her work, as it's easier than constantly pretending to be a child at home. Roland dabs at his eyes, as if overcome with emotion, while Patty stands beside him, looking on calmly. Her peaceful moment is interrupted as she and an older, stern-looking woman look up in surprise. She stands before a magnificent, gold-trimmed canopy bed, sweating as she asks if this is really her room. Turning to the head court lady, she happily asks if this is the wrong room. The head court lady firmly states that the room is correct, as it is the VIP room closest to His Majesty's quarters. Stunned, Patty drops her luggage, wondering why a new recruit is being given such a massive responsibility. Hesitantly, she opens the door to her new closet. Inside, she finds a wardrobe filled with an array of beautiful, shimmering gowns. The head court lady explains that His Majesty personally asked for the outfits to be prepared, leaving Patty speechless. She nervously wonders what Theo is planning, as this feels more like the treatment of a royal mistress than a lady-in-waiting. Patty asks the head court lady to call her by name, fearing that being called lady will make people think she's the king's mistress. Agreeing, the head court lady addresses her as Patty and asks her to choose a dress. Patty is revealed in a stunning light blue gown, looking radiant amidst a shower of flowers. She marvels at how beautiful the dress is and how perfectly it fits. She grows suspicious, wondering why a lady-in-waiting would receive such an expensive new gown. As the head court lady knocks on an ornate door, a voice from within invites them to enter. Now dressed for her new role, Patty looks down nervously before entering the office. Inside, Theo is busy at his desk while his aide, Roland, sits nearby with a folder. Theo looks up with a slight smile, formally welcoming Lady Alvin. Patty is awestruck by the sheer magnificence of the king's office. Theo explains that this is her new workplace, where she'll assist him and Roland, leaving her completely stunned. Roland beams, expressing his genuine delight at finally having a coworker. He enthusiastically shoves a massive stack of papers toward her, looking forward to their work together as she internally shrieks. The absurdity of the situation hits her as she questions the sanity of having a 12-year-old assist the king. Theo officially assigns her to her new post, instructing her to assist him alongside a waving Roland. Overwhelmed, Patty panics, convinced she's unqualified for the job as a 12-year-old with no experience. Crushed by the pressure, she collapses onto the desk, feeling it's impossible for her to assist the king. Roland looks on, genuinely impressed by her reaction. Theo muses about everyone having 3 lookalikes, but when Roland agrees, Theo curtly tells him to shut up. Ignoring the king, the aide formally introduces himself to Patty as Roland Alvarez. Patty is taken aback, recognizing he's from the prestigious Alvarez Marquise family. Roland asks to call her Patty, and she agrees, inviting him to just call her Roland in return. Her eyes widen in sudden shock at something she's just realized. Across the room, Theo stews at his desk, his expression hardening with irritation. Roland laughs and teases Theo, pointing out that if he wanted to call her Patty, he could have simply asked. Surrounded by a floral frame, a pensive Theo considers Roland's words. Taking the opportunity, Patty shyly tells His Majesty he is welcome to call her Patty, too. Theo looks over his shoulder and asks if she is sure, to which she happily confirms. Visibly moved, Theo softly says her name for the first time. Patty. She beams with a bright smile, responding, "Yes, Your Majesty." Watching the exchange, Roland looks slightly taken aback by their immediate rapport. Roland cheerfully slings an arm around her, officially welcoming his new coworker. He leads her away for a tour, leaving Theo with a parting order to finish all the paperwork. Patty glances back, anxiously wondering if it's truly okay to leave the king with so much work. Left alone with a mountain of documents, a furious Theo grips his pen so tightly that it snaps in two. Roland begins his tour, cheerfully leading Patty through the grand palace corridors. He introduces her to the small assembly hall, explaining it's used for minor meetings. Next, he shows her the grand assembly hall, where major meetings with high-ranking nobles are held. Patty's head spins as she realizes how vast the palace is and how difficult it will be to learn her way around. Their tour continues into a breathtaking garden filled with vibrant red roses. She gasps, completely captivated by the beautiful scenery. Roland smiles, asking if she likes the garden as she turns to him, nodding enthusiastically. The view lingers on a close-up of the lush, sparkling pink roses. As they walk, Roland asks if she knows the real reason she was chosen as the king's exclusive maid. He explains that His Majesty once had a first love. Patty is surprised to hear this, questioning if Theo really had a first love. She feels a pang of loneliness, realizing Theo never told her he had someone he loved. Roland drops a bombshell. Theo's first love was her stepsister, the knight captain Patricia Alvin. The revelation short-circuits her brain, leaving her utterly speechless and confused. He continues, explaining that Lady Patricia was Theo's superior officer in the military and had looked after him. Roland points out her striking resemblance to his first love, while Patty internally grapples with the irony of their shared past. He explains that according to the Frontier Marquis' army, Patricia's body was never recovered. The story flashes back to the formidable Frontier Marquis and his powerful army. Roland reveals that the Marquis, hating the manipulative former queen, secretly raised Theo in the frontier lands to become the next king. With the Marquis' backing, the throne was successfully usurped 6 months ago. Patty reflects on the incredible twist of fate that has entangled her in this royal drama. As Roland pauses, she quietly acknowledges to herself that his words ring true. He remarks on the sadness of the situation, a sentiment reflected in her somber expression. He cruelly suggests that her own father merely adopted her as a doll to replace his lost daughter Patricia. With a smirk, Roland adds that His Majesty now desires her for the same twisted reason, as a substitute for his first love. He mockingly calls the situation bad taste, and sarcastically comments on how popular she is as a stand-in. Overwhelmed by his cruel words, she feels a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Steeling herself, she turns to face him, formally addressing him as Lord Roland. She stands before him with quiet resolve, ready to confront his accusations. Realizing Roland must feel threatened, she internally dismisses his first love story as a complete fabrication. She correctly deduces his fear that she, an orphan of unknown lineage, could use her appearance to charm the king and aim for the throne. Looking him in the eye, she calmly assures him that she has no ambition to become queen and is only here to work. She boldly challenges him to voice his concerns directly to the king, confident that His Majesty would listen to a trusted aide. Surprised by her sharp and direct response, Roland can only manage a short, impressed laugh. She smiles, reaffirming her sincere desire to do her best and be of service to His Majesty. Defeated, Roland abruptly ends the tour, telling her to direct any problems to the head lady-in-waiting. As he departs, she wonders if his intense concern is shared by everyone else in the palace. She pictures the tragic, romantic narrative that people must be imagining between her and the king. Standing beside the head court lady, she questions whether Roland was being manipulative or if his fears are widespread. Seeking clarity, she decides to ask the head court lady directly if it's true she resembles the king's first love. The head court lady calmly confirms that her resemblance to Theo's lost love is common knowledge among the palace staff. The confirmation sends Patty into a comic panic, horrified that people genuinely think Theo wants to make her queen. She clutches her head in despair, realizing the insane implication that Theo is grooming a child look-alike to be his future wife. She understands the political usefulness of such a story, painting the king as a tragic, romantic hero. A few weeks pass, shifting the story forward in time. Now dressed in a simple maid's uniform, Patty calmly agrees to her assigned duties. She reflects that because she's the only one unafraid of the king, the other staff keep pushing all of his direct duties onto her. She notes with surprise that after their confrontation, Lord Roland has made no further attempts to restrain her. Instead, Roland now cheerfully praises her work in front of others, much to her inner exasperation at his smooth maneuvering. The scene finds Theo working diligently by candlelight, poring over documents late into the night. Bringing him tea, Patty calls him out for repeatedly breaking his promise to rest. She expresses her genuine concern, warning him that losing sleep is like shortening his own life. He dismisses her worries, explaining his powerful healing magic protects him from everything except instant death. She points out that healing magic can't erase fatigue, and he seems struck by her description of his power as convenient. Theo smiles, remarking that he's used to people finding him creepy, but she is the first to ever call him convenient. He playfully turns the tables, ordering her to go to bed because children need their sleep. His mind drifts to a memory of his younger self, eagerly begging Captain Patricia for another sparring match. He recalls the moment he nervously presented her with a gift of lace fabric. The sweet memory of telling her how well it suited her is jarringly interrupted by a desperate plea, "Please don't die." The flashback culminates in his tearful confession of love at the moment of Patricia's apparent death. Back in the present, a dazed Patty jolts, startled by the sudden, powerful memory. Noticing her strange behavior, Theo calls out her name with concern. In a moment of sudden clarity, Patty finally understands the depth of his past feelings for her. As Patricia, it was true love. Lost in his own memories, Theo softly confirms his feelings, surrounded by a romantic vision of roses. The word echoes in the golden light as he affirms his feelings once more. It's love. She recalls thinking of Theo as a hopeless man who survived by sacrificing what he loved. He laments that at the crucial moment, he failed to cast the regeneration spell. She thinks to herself that despite her new appearance, she's still alive. She explains that Theo's immense magic rejuvenated all her cells, reverting her to the body of a child. Now in the present, she struggles to tell the grieving Theo that she is really Patricia. She internally panics, thinking she can't reveal her secret dream of becoming a cute bride because it would be too embarrassing. Theo looks down at a crystal ball, fondly remembering Patricia's beauty, kindness, and strong will. A vision of the magnificent, red-haired Commander Patricia appears, radiating confidence. Patty sweats nervously, thinking his glorification of her past self is way too much. Speaking to the young girl now called Patty, Theo clarifies he doesn't intend to overlap her with Commander Patricia. He looks at her with a gentle smile, telling her he just wants her to grow up healthy and happy by his side. Patty looks up at him, moved by his sincere wish for her happiness. Filled with determination, she cheerfully promises to do her best to live up to his expectations. Theo sips his tea and quietly agrees, a faint smile on his lips. Resolved, Patty pushes a tea cart, vowing to work hard for Theo's sake. Overwhelmed, Patty lies face down on a massive pile of paperwork. Roland approaches, noticing her struggle with the documents and offering to take over for her. She looks up with relief, admitting his help would be huge since she's a muscle for brains. She reflects that while she initially found the easygoing Lord Roland annoying, she now realizes the country couldn't function without his insane efficiency. A flashback shows Lord Roland as Theo's right-hand man, a loyal friend and retainer since before Theo became king. Patty looks up at Roland with a grateful smile and thanks him. She politely declines his help for now, determined to finish her secretarial duties before her break. Roland smiles, realizing her upcoming time off is the reason for her sudden diligence. The scene cuts to a silent Theo sitting at his desk, emanating a powerful, intimidating aura. Memory of two concerned men noting she's only 12 flashes through her mind. She feels guilty, imagining Theo making a sulky face like a sad puppy every time she has to leave. Roland asks what she plans to do during her break. She tells Theo she has all the more reason to finish strong, and he sternly agrees. With her arms raised in triumph, she joyfully declares that the work is finally done. Announcing she'll see them in 3 days, Patty excuses herself and leaves as Roland waves goodbye. HMPH. Theo watches her go with a slight pout, quietly acknowledging her departure. A maid asks Patty if she's leaving tomorrow, and Patty confirms she's returning to her family home. Patty worries that the maid, who is in charge during her absence, might be scared of Theo. She reassures the nervous maid that His Majesty is a kind person who wouldn't harm the innocent. The maid looks surprised as Patty boasts that she's survived a year of mouthing off without a scratch. The maid laughs, admitting that's true, as Patty stands proudly. The maid wishes Lady Patty an enjoyable time off, and Patty thanks her, promising to be back soon. A horse-drawn carriage waits outside the Grand Palace under a crescent moon. Wah! Two red-haired men rush towards Patty with looks of shock and concern. She apologizes for not finishing her work, feeling a sense of detachment from her new life. The men reach out to her as she wonders if she can ever fully embrace this new beginning. One suggests they go have dinner. Meanwhile, Theo and Roland sit down for a quiet dinner at the palace. Theo glares at his companion, annoyed, and asks why he has to eat with him again. Roland cheerfully insists he's just keeping His Majesty company out of kindness, knowing he'd be lonely without Patty. A light bulb appears over Roland's head as he gets a bright idea. He leans in and slyly suggests that Theo go see her in disguise. Theo pauses, fork in hand, his expression unreadable as he considers the proposition. Elsewhere, the two red-haired men from Patty's family look utterly dejected. Patty stands before two red-haired men from her family. One tearfully wipes his eyes, while the other looks on sadly. A red-haired woman scolds them, insisting they can't skip the clan meeting about succession after the younger man suggests it. As they prepare to leave in a carriage, the older man laments leaving Patty, who cheerfully wishes her father and brother a safe trip. A slightly older-looking Patty smiles and waves as the carriage pulls away. Sighing in relief, she thinks to herself that her family is a bit much sometimes, and she's finally free. Announcing she should get going, Patty turns to her maid, who eagerly offers to get her ready right away. Now dressed in an elegant pink gown, Patty looks beautiful amidst a backdrop of pink flowers. Two maids, one older and one younger, look on with delighted and adoring expressions. Patty observes them, thinking that the current servants are all very kind. She realizes her father must have replaced the old staff as a form of atonement for their past treatment of her. The scene shifts to a bright, sunny day in a charming town square. Her maid asks if she has plans for the day, and Patty enthusiastically says yes. She thinks about the fancy dresses and jewelry her body supposedly craves, things they don't want her to have. With a determined expression, Patty sets her mind to her true goal. She abruptly turns and walks off, leaving her maid to call out in surprise. Standing before a sturdy wooden door, Patty tells her concerned maid to wait outside. Inside a dusty workshop filled with armor and weapons, a burly blacksmith stands with his arms crossed. Patty enters the blacksmith's shop, standing before the large man. She fondly recalls that people reacted with similar disbelief back then too. Approaching the workbench, she asks the blacksmith for a weapon, preferably something light. To demonstrate, she tries lifting a heavy sword but immediately stumbles and falls from the weight. The blacksmith looks down at her, struggling on the floor, and says, "See? I told you." A vision of her former self appears, effortlessly holding the same sword as its blade glows with golden magic. She explains she came, seeking a weapon with high magical conductivity, causing the blacksmith to stare at her in dawning recognition. Gasp! The blacksmith shouts her name in shock. "Patricia!" He looms over her, demanding to know why she's so tiny. Patty nervously feigns ignorance, thinking no one would believe she de-aged. He holds the magic-infused sword, stating her magical signature is identical and reminding her how many years he's forged her weapons. With a sigh, Patty finally admits her identity, explaining she accidentally turned back into a child. The blacksmith stands in disbelief, demanding to know what happened to her. The two sit down in the workshop to discuss her situation. He tells her he assumed she had died or quit knighthood after she vanished 5 years ago. He finishes, saying he never imagined she'd return looking like a child. Smiling, he says he's just glad she's alive and has returned to buy one of his swords. Patty laments losing all the muscles she trained for years, but he cheerfully tells her to just build them again. She looks down sadly, admitting that restarting her life is proving to be very tough. She reflects on all the hardship and effort she put into her past life, all of which is now gone, leaving her with nothing but her life. Getting back to business, the blacksmith recalls her request for a short sword with high magical conductivity. He presents a gleaming short sword with a red hilt and asks if it will do. Her eyes sparkle with delight as she declares it's perfect, confident she can wield it in her current small body. She thinks of Theo, both as the young boy she trained and the king he is now, musing that he might not remember her. The blacksmith winks, surprising Patty by revealing that he still makes swords for his majesty. He explains he keeps his status as a royal supplier quiet to avoid extra work as he accepts her payment. Clutching her new sword, she feels glad that Theo still values their shared memories, envisioning his younger self smiling. The blacksmith offers to forge her another if this one isn't right, and she thanks him for his help. As she leaves, he promises not to tell anyone her secret. Outside, Patty asks her maid to keep her identity a secret as well, especially from her father and brother. The maid is momentarily shocked but quickly agrees to keep the secret. With her mission accomplished, a cheerful Patty decides it's time to go look at some cute things. Her happy mood is shattered when she looks up and sees a familiar face, thinking in shock, "No way, Theo!" She panics internally, wondering what he's doing here while also noticing his hair is now black instead of white. While on an outing, Patty is surprised to see a familiar figure, wondering why the king is in a place like this. PF'd, she barely stifles a laugh as Theo greets her with a comically monotone, "What a coincidence, Patty." Playing along, she smiles and asks what His Majesty is doing here. Theo replies with a serious expression that he's not a king right now, but a simple wandering traveler. She playfully points out that no wandering traveler dresses quite so neatly, leaving him momentarily confused. Growing concerned, she asks if he truly came all this way by himself, and he confirms that he did. He looks away, insisting that for now, he is just a civilian. Standing behind Patty, a brown-haired woman looks on in absolute shock. As the woman reels, Patty turns away, thinking to herself that as long as no one recognizes him, Theo is actually a good guy. She turns back to him, correcting his title from Your Majesty to just Theo. With a weary sigh, she settles on calling him Lord Theo. Hearing her use his name, a blushing Theo beams with pure, unadulterated joy. His dazzling smile is so overwhelming that a tiny, chibi Patty recoils in annoyance. Clearing her throat, she gets serious and asks him why he came without a single guard. He places a hand over his heart, calmly stating that he needs no guards, as he can stop the heart of anyone around him at will. Gasp! Overhearing his terrifying threat, The nearby woman flees in terror. Patty watches her go, thinking to herself what a complete fool he is. Her thoughts continue, recalling her past as she thinks that, as a former commander, she can see right through his bravado. She lectures him, reminding him that there are many ways to assassinate someone from a distance. He smirks, challenging her by boasting that poison doesn't work on him and that he's incredibly difficult to kill. With a stern gaze, she reminds him of a lesson she once taught him. Overconfidence is deadly. She internally muses that his invincibility is limited to close combat, and that even she can devise ways to kill him. Resigning herself to the situation, she offers to travel with him, figuring her magic can still protect him even if she's lost muscle. Theo smiles playfully, asking if she's offering to be his protector. She smiles back warmly and confirms that she is. His expression instantly darkens, and his eyes glow red as he sternly rejects her offer, telling her she doesn't need to do that. His sudden, intense reaction leaves both Patty and her companion completely startled. A memory surfaces of her as Patricia, declaring that she never wants anyone else to die for her sake. Seeing through his harsh words, Patty smiles gently and tells him that he's a kind person after all. He turns away, brushing off her compliment by saying he just thinks it's pointless for her to protect him. She insists that not wanting others to get hurt is the very definition of kindness. Deciding to move on, she nervously suggests they drop the subject and then cheerfully extends a hand, asking if he's ready to go. She instinctively grabs his arm, leading him away as her companion watches in utter disbelief. She panics internally, realizing she just grabbed him out of old habit, flashing back to a memory of her as Patricia drunkenly dragging a young, white-haired Theo. He smiles and agrees to go, and they walk off together holding hands through the streets. The scene transitions, showing the idyllic architecture of the town they are exploring. As they walk, she observes him closely, realizing he's trying to understand the market prices like a true king. The moment reminds her of the past, when she and a much younger, white-haired Theo used to stroll through town just like this. A memory plays of her happily enjoying street food, while a flustered young Theo looks on. She remembers how he had never bought street food before. That day, his cheeks puffed out as he took his first bite. Back in the present, a gentle smile graces her lips as she cherishes the sweet memory. Theo notices her expression and asks if there is something she'd like to eat. Her eyes light up with excitement as she happily requests something sweet. He smiles, noting her love for sweets, and suggests a fruit cutting stand he knows of in a nearby park. The scene shifts to a breathtaking view of a large, elegant park with a central fountain and manicured gardens. As they admire the view, Theo mentions that it's said to be the most beautiful spot in the capital. Patty looks around in awe, agreeing that it is indeed incredibly beautiful. But her expression quickly turns serious as she realizes this beautiful place isn't necessarily a safe one. Surveying the quiet, open space, she thinks that unlike the bustling main streets, this area is perfect for an ambush. Theo comments on her observation, while Patty notes how fascinating it is to see him act like a king. Zap! Her eyes widen as her instincts scream of a sudden, magical threat. Looking up in alarm, she sees a massive, crackling sphere of dark purple energy forming in the sky. For a brief moment, they stand together peacefully before the park, unaware of the impending attack. Whipped by a sudden gust of wind, Patty turns with a look of pure shock and dread. The sinister orb of purple magic continues to gather power, crackling with destructive intent. The massive magical attack hurtles down from the sky, aimed directly at them. She panics, realizing that a magical attack of this magnitude would be lethal to both her and Theo, and wonders how she could possibly block it. Cursing her weak body, she steels herself, resolving that, at the very least, she can become his shield. With a fierce cry, she shoves Theo with all her might, trying to push him out of the blast radius. Theo glances up, his expression remaining surprisingly calm in the face of danger. Before she can move away, he pulls her into his arms, leaving her stunned by his sudden action. With a stern expression, Theo raises his hand towards the incoming attack. Bam! With a brilliant flash, the massive purple spell harmlessly dissipates into nothingness. Nearby onlookers gasp and squeal, dazzled by the sudden, spectacular display. Safely in his arms, Patty looks up in wide-eyed shock as he holds her protectively. Her breath catches in her throat as she can only think one word: amazing. She internally scolds him, remembering she had definitely told him not to imitate moves like that. She starts to call out his name, a mix of concern and awe on her face. She realizes her body just moves on its own when she sees someone in danger. Frustrated by her own helplessness, tears begin to well up in her eyes. Seeing her cry, a frantic Theo begs her to stop, explaining that he was just worried about her. Overwhelmed by the situation, she stands silently as tears stream down her face. She chides herself for becoming so emotionally childish. Bowing her head, she apologizes for her rash actions. He gently wipes her tears away, apologizing for speaking too harshly and startling her. After composing herself, she looks up at him and asks what the attack was about. He calmly explains that it's the usual, as his life is always being targeted. He then sincerely apologizes for getting her involved in the danger. Now that the danger has passed, Patty curiously asks His Majesty how he blocked the magic. Her inner magic nerd awakens, buzzing with excitement to know what kind of defense magic he used. He casually touches his hair, explaining that he just hit it head-on with his own mana. She stares in disbelief, realizing he countered a powerful spell without any formal incantation. A narrator explains that while mana is usually channeled through spells, Theo can crush attacks with pure mana control, a feat only he can achieve. She recalls that the only assassination plan she could devise for him was a long-range magic attack, and realizes he already knew of this weakness. Awestruck, she acknowledges that Theo has grown up to become so much stronger than she ever was. Her concern returning, she nervously asks if Lord Theo is all right. Theo gives a slight wave, dismissing her worries. He suggests they return to the palace for the day, but she worries that another attack might come. He reassures her by promising to take her to the boutique and cafe another time. He smiles blissfully, already looking forward to their next outing together. The next day, Patty walks alone through a sunlit corridor in the palace. She muses that while she enjoys vacations, dealing with her overprotective father and brother is a hassle. A cheerful voice welcomes her back, and she turns to see a smiling Lord Roland. She forces a polite, albeit strained, smile in return. Roland asks if they caught the culprit from the attack, and she informs him that they escaped. He leans in, adding that while there's no proof, they have a strong suspicion about who was behind it. Patty listens with a serious expression, her mind processing the information, winking knowingly. Roland confirms that her suspicions are correct. Roland continues his thought, recalling how the former Queen Dowager tried to have His Majesty and the entire Magic Knight unit killed on the front lines. He internally reflects that he almost died because of the Queen, who Theo despises, and who surely hates Theo in return for taking everything from her. He tells Patty that the Queen is a stubborn one who managed to escape after the former king was killed, and her location remains unknown. As Patty listens thoughtfully, the narration explains the Queen is likely being sheltered by her birth family, the Duke's house, even a year after the rebellion. Patty shares her own theory with a serious expression, stating that there must be a mole somewhere close to the center of power. A surprised Roland asks if she has any suspects in mind, to which she thoughtfully replies, "Let's see." Looking at him with a sly smile, Patty playfully suggests that perhaps Lord Roland himself is the suspect, leaving him with a faint smirk. A promotional image features a woman with black hair and red eyes, smiling menacingly. Patty presses her accusation more directly, asking, "The traitor? Is it you, Lord Roland?" Wah! Roland bursts into comical tears, crying that she's being mean, while Patty internally mimics his dramatic denial. As Patty laughs at his over-the-top reaction, a tiny chibi Roland begs her to say she trusts him. Roland smiles, while Patty internally dismisses him as a suspect, reasoning his prestigious background and future as Theo's aide give him no motive to betray them. Roland notes that His Majesty has no shortage of enemies, prompting Patty to ask him, as a close aide, for more information. He shares a rumor that a surviving member of the former royal family is being secretly supported by the Queen Dowager and rebels, leaving Patty stunned. Roland leans in with a mischievous grin, revealing his family has always leaned toward the anti-government faction, shocking Patty. He plays dumb as Patty looks on with wide-eyed confusion. Suddenly engulfed in comedic flames of resolve, Roland declares he's going home, and Patty calmly wishes him a good rest. They exchange friendly waves and bid each other farewell until tomorrow. Knock knock, Patty announces herself at the Emperor's door and is told to come in. After she enters, Roland is left standing alone in the hallway, his expression turning pensive. He smirks to himself, thinking she's strangely sharp for her age, and chalking it up to animalistic intuition. His expression grows somber as he turns to leave, thinking that nothing can be changed now anyway. Inside, Patty bows before Theo's desk, announcing her return from her time off. Theo questions her early return, reminding her that her leave isn't over yet. As he tells her to go rest, she internally fumes at the irony, since he was the one who snuck out to see her. Putting on an act, Patty pleads with him not to send her away, claiming she came back because she thought he'd be lonely. She inwardly celebrates as he becomes flustered, and he looks away while denying he was lonely, which makes her think some things never change. Standing before his desk, she enthusiastically declares that she'll resume her duties tomorrow. Theo gives in with a gentle smile, telling her to rest well. Later that night, Patty sits alone in her moonlit room, lost in thought. In the quiet of her room, she holds a small, ornate dagger, her expression serious. She recalls the helplessness she felt during Theo's attack, lamenting that she had wanted to live as a normal, noble lady. Musing on her second life, she feels that despite her strong magic, being protected feels unsatisfying, and that something is missing. Gripping the dagger with renewed resolve, she realizes she needs stamina and muscle, deciding then and there to start training. She practices a lunge, feeling that her body still remembers its military drills and that this new plan might actually work. A few minutes later, a spotlight finds her collapsed on the floor, completely exhausted and panting for breath. Struggling on the floor, she grits her teeth, determined not to let her weakness continue. The next morning, a re-energized Patty knocks and announces her arrival to the Emperor. Holding a wash basin, she winces as even the simple act of knocking sends jolts of pain through her sore muscles. She enters the room and stops in her tracks, surprised by what she sees. In a floral fantasy, a shirtless Theo is sleeping peacefully on a couch, clutching a pillow. A warm smile graces her face as she watches him sleep. She fondly recalls her past as Patricia, remembering how she had to scold a young Theo for clinging to his bunkmate in his sleep. Her cheerful greeting is cut short as Theo's eyes snap open, startling her. Shaking from surprise and soreness, she struggles to hold the basin steady, insisting that she's perfectly fine. A concerned Theo offers to examine her and uses magic to heal her. As he reaches for her, she panics, thinking his healing will ruin her hard-earned muscles, and yells that she's just sore. She explains that feeling pathetic after the attack motivated her to train, resulting in her current full-body soreness. With fiery determination, she declares that she wants to be strong enough to protect him and that this pain is a necessary part of it. A tiny, chibi Patty flexes proudly, surrounded by floating biceps, declaring her commitment to getting strong. TFFT. A flustered Theo tries to stifle his laughter, covering his mouth as he blushes. Hiding his face, he tells her she doesn't have to laugh so hard, but an annoyed Patty insists that's not why she's laughing. She suddenly recalls a memory of herself as a soldier struggling to carry barrels, and realizes with a shock that she was the one Theo always laughed at. Wah! His unspoken words leave her completely stunned and blushing furiously. Later, walking down a hall, she bemoans her exhaustion and sore muscles, now compounded by his shocking confession. Two maids greet Lady Patty good morning, and she warmly returns the sentiment. Staring at her meal with resolve, she reaffirms her decision to build muscle and watch her diet. But as she eats, she suddenly feels ill, dropping her fork with a clatter and coughing violently before collapsing to the floor, vomiting blood. In the darkness of her fading consciousness, she wonders why this is happening to her. A panicked Roland bursts through a door, urgently calling for His Majesty. He rushes into Theo's meeting, and Theo immediately asks what's wrong. Roland whispers the horrifying news to Theo. Patty has been poisoned and collapsed, vomiting blood. A close-up reveals Theo's eyes, widening in pure shock and dawning fury. Without a moment's hesitation, Theo springs from his chair and bolts from the room. He finds her unconscious on the floor and cries out her name in anguish. He gently cradles her in his arms, her face stained with blood, as he thinks that she is going to cry. In a haze of golden light, her final thoughts drift to her family, finding it a blessing to know they would mourn her. Sometime later, Patty awakens peacefully in a luxurious bed. She turns her head to find Theo asleep at her bedside, his head resting near her pillow. Startled awake by her movement, a relieved Theo exclaims that she's finally awake. With a tear-streaked and exhausted face, he passionately asks how he could have possibly slept while she was poisoned. He reveals she's been unconscious for 3 days, even after he used detoxification and healing magic on her. He tenderly holds her hand, gazing at her with overwhelming relief. Smiling weakly, she thanks His Majesty, acknowledging that she's alive because of him. He gently insists she not call him Your Majesty, so she corrects herself with a soft laugh, thanking Lord Theo instead. Theo looks down at their clasped hands, tormented by the thought that she was targeted because he kept her so close to him. She reassures him with a bright smile, promising she would never resent him. He looks down, his expression still heavy with guilt and concern as he holds her hand. The narration explains that while many visited, they decided to keep her poisoning a secret. Patty reflects on her family's love, something that's still hard to believe given their past. Lord Roland peeks into her room, cautiously asking if she's okay. Reclining in bed, she assures him she's fine, thanks to His Majesty's healing. Roland smiles, relieved to see her looking healthy, while she apologizes for worrying him. He tells her not to worry about him, revealing that His Majesty hasn't slept for 3 days, staying constantly by her side. He looks on thoughtfully, telling her that she has made the Emperor quite human. Confused by his statement, she asks him what he means. Roland explains that His Majesty is a monster whose immense magical power instantly heals any wound, making him untouchable. He continues, describing Theo's power to kill with a glare and his lack of hesitation in harming others, since he has nothing precious to lose. Pointing at her, Roland declares that she was targeted because she has shaken Theo's reign of terror. A narrator adds that while Theo's ruthlessness inspires fear, he also ended countless wars and saved many lives. Patty asks Lord Roland if he's still afraid of the Emperor, prompting a thoughtful pause. Roland then grins, admitting he's started to find His Majesty cute, and Patty eagerly agrees. However, he turns serious again, stating that the instinctive fear of someone who can kill instantly is hard to overcome. Patty somberly reflects that a rule of fear is destined to collapse, just like the previous kings. Her mood suddenly brightens as she declares that a mage strategy is needed, surprising Roland with her positivity. She asks Lord Roland for ideas on how to change the public's perception of the Emperor. He suggests she stay by Theo's side more, reasoning that if people see she isn't afraid, their views might change. Understanding his point, she compares it to seeing a tough man show unexpected kindness to a stray puppy. She fondly recalls how a young Theo once found and raised a baby bird that had fallen from its nest, wondering what became of it. Patricia praises Lord Roland as a genius, making the gray-haired man laugh heartily. Roland smiles, expressing his wish for Patricia to become precious to His Majesty. Patricia, in bed, excitedly declares her intention to show everyone their closeness, all for Theo's sake. Candles illuminate a dark room, casting a warm glow on the table below. A gray-haired woman carrying a lantern approaches Theo, seated at a desk, asking if something is wrong. Theo looks serious, reacting with surprise to the mention of the Queen's chambers. Theo looks bewildered within the grand, opulent chamber, his thoughts indicating confusion. Patricia explains to the gray-haired woman that she has recovered from poisoning and has been moved to a new room. Patricia and the gray-haired woman stand in the grand hall, as Patricia wonders if this room belonged to past queens. Patricia, looking puzzled, questions why the gray-haired headmaid is suddenly speaking to her so formally. Patricia, in a maid outfit, sternly requests Theo to return her room to its original state. Theo acknowledges Patricia's energy, but firmly rejects her request to change her room. Theo asks Patricia if she realizes what room she is in, to which she confidently replies, of course. Theo explains the room is closest to his, while an exasperated Patricia thinks he missed her true meaning. An angry Patricia clarifies to Theo that she was referring to the significant purpose of the room. Theo calmly explains to Patricia that the room was formerly the chamber of every queen. Theo gravely informs Patricia that both of them have now become targets for assassination. Patricia's poisoning is revealed through her bloody cough and a tainted meal, with the thought that the culprit is still in the palace among the servants. A framed image of Patricia in military uniform is shown, with narration explaining she was targeted to inflict pain on Theo, who hasn't moved on from his first love. Theo declares his absolute intent to ensure Patricia's safety, surprising her. Theo states he won't take his eyes off her, causing Patricia to find his intensity a bit overwhelming. Patricia reflects on being placed in the Queen's chamber for protection, and her identity as an orphan resembling Theo's first love. Patricia sighs, asserting she doesn't care about public opinion regarding her being given the Queen's chamber. Theo declares that he will crush anyone who publicly criticizes his decision. Patricia reacts in shock, lamenting Theo's power solves everything attitude and questionable morality. Two maids, one brown-haired and one gray-haired, arrive with a tiered tray to announce lunch. Theo invites Patricia to share lunch with him, saying it would be a waste to not eat together. Patricia looks surprised, a fork near her mouth, while the gray-haired maid watches intently. The gray-haired maid lunges, attacking with a dagger in a swift, unexpected move. The gray-haired maid attacks, her dagger aimed at a shocked Patricia. Patricia, wide-eyed, realizes her reflexes are too dull to react to the attack. A sudden, swift motion is depicted. Patricia's face is spattered with blood, her eyes wide with pain and surprise. Theo shields Patricia, taking the dagger strike himself, as blood splatters around them. The gray-haired maid looks on in shock at the unexpected turn of events. Theo's eye glows red as he emits a guttural sound, while the gray-haired maid coughs blood and collapses, terrifying the other maid. Theo stands protectively over Patricia, still holding the gray-haired maid, as another maid frantically calls for help. Patricia screams in horror upon seeing blood gushing from Theo's hand. Theo's hand glows with golden light, quickly healing his wound. Patricia sadly apologizes to Theo, gently holding his now healed hand. Theo gazes at Patricia with a serious and unreadable expression. Patricia, flustered, apologizes to Theo for reverting to her military tone. Theo thoughtfully asks Patricia if she is not afraid of him. Patricia replies that she finds his power impressive and not at all frightening. Patricia expresses concern that people now believe Theo has taken a child bride, but he personally doesn't mind. Theo looks exasperated as Patricia insists he maintain a more dignified image as a noble. Patricia looks determined, asking about an image strategy while Theo observes her. Patricia proposes that Theo treat her with fatherly affection to improve his public image, showing an illustration of him with a puppy. Theo affectionately pats Patricia's head, calling her adorable, which makes her blush. Patty playfully sticks out her tongue in annoyance. Puffed, Lord Roland suppresses a laugh at the sight of Patty, much to the confusion of the guards standing with him. In a fond memory, Theo and Patty look at a small, bear-shaped treat she's holding while visiting a town. She recalls how his kind gestures, like buying her sweets, sometimes made her feel a little squirm. Over time, everyone began to notice how much more expressive and gentle the Emperor was becoming. Two maids gossip fondly, agreeing that His Majesty is absolutely smitten with Lady Patty and seems much softer than before. Patty smiles warmly, content in her role by his side. A shot of her brilliant red hair flows as she reflects that every day she found herself drawn closer to Theo. She walks purposefully toward a brightly lit doorway, ready to face the future. 3 years later, a 16-year-old Patty arrives with a suitcase, announcing her presence to His Majesty. She playfully teases him about the deep frown line between his brows, making him look up from his work. Theo's expression turns serious as he explains that her father and brother are insisting she return home, and he can't stop it. She recalls being targeted by an assassin at age 13, which forced her to stay at the palace for her own safety. While her family used to visit her at the palace, she now wonders why they're suddenly insisting she come home. She flexes her arm confidently, reassuring a concerned Theo that she's strong enough to be okay. Flashing back to the bloody aftermath of the attack, she recalls her vow to train her body and never be helpless again. She realized then that what she truly lacked was muscle, and became determined to build her strength. In the past, Theo had gently promised that he would always protect her. She had fiercely declared back then that she would become strong enough to protect him too. In the intervening 3 years, she nearly peaked in physical, sword, and magical power, a secret she kept from Theo, known only to the blacksmith and one other. With the help of her secret ally, she created a magical defense net around the palace, eliminating assassins without Theo's knowledge. Back in the present, she tells Theo that her leaving isn't an issue of strength. Lord Roland steps forward, asking His Majesty to hear him out on the matter. With a cheerful wave, Roland urges Theo to let her go home this once, earning an annoyed glare from the Emperor. Haha, Roland laughs that they both make the same grumpy face, while a flustered Patty insists she's just his court lady. Arriving home, Patty is welcomed back with open arms by her smiling father and brother. She internally remarks on the impressive bodyguard sent with her, feeling a bit flustered by the attention. She offers her family a soft, appreciative smile. Her father and brother announce they've brought her favorite things, and she thanks them graciously. She understands they shower her with love to replace the daughter they lost, Patricia, as they gaze at a portrait of her in uniform. At dinner, she's caught off guard when the topic of her debut in high society is raised. Her father explains that now that she's 16, it is about time for her to be formally introduced. She reflects on her past life as a soldier, remembering how she never had a debut and felt a pang of loneliness watching other noble girls in beautiful dresses. Her father insists that, as the daughter of the Alvain Count family, her social debut must be done properly, regardless of her duties as a court lady. Her eyes narrow as she bitterly thinks that they never did anything for Patricia. Swallowing her resentment, she bows her head and agrees, thanking them for their consideration. Her brother and father smile, commenting on how fast time flies and how she's become a proper lady. Huff. Ugh. She sighs in frustration, annoyed that they're also making assumptions about her and Theo's relationship. A kind-looking woman approaches, excitedly asking Lady Patty if she is finally making her debut. The woman, the head maid hired after Patty left, sadly recalls how the master made many preparations for Patricia, who never returned home. Patty is taken aback by this revelation and asks for more details. As the maid explains that everything was prepared, from the dress to the accessories, Patty realizes with a shock that she had no idea. With a determined smile, she asks to see the items, hoping to use them as a reference for her own debut. Yes, of course, the head maid happily agrees, telling her that everything should still be in her old room. The scene shifts to the mansion at night, focusing on the room where she spent her painful childhood. Inside, the room is dark and still, with furniture cloaked in dusty white sheets. As the maid enters with a lantern, Patty follows and realizes the cold, barren room she remembered has been completely transformed. The maid removes a sheet to reveal a stunning, elaborate white ball gown, leaving Patty in awe. She stares at the dress, her expression a mixture of surprise and wonder. The head maid softly adds that the master still comes to this room to gaze at the dress with a wistful look. "I see," Patty says quietly, turning away to process the bittersweet discovery. Overcome with emotion, Patty clutches her dress and desperately questions why this is happening. Back at the palace, Lord Roland cheerfully welcomes Patty back and asks about her trip as Theo works at his desk. She thanks them for letting her go, explaining she had a nice time with her father, to which Theo simply grunts in acknowledgement. Placing a hand on her chest, she announces that after some thought, she has made a decision. Thump, Theo suddenly slams his hand down on his desk, startling a wide-eyed Lord Roland. She looks at a surprised Theo and asks about the possibility of her debuting in high society. Theo abruptly stands from his desk, his sudden movement catching both Patty and Lord Roland off guard. Lord Roland turns to Patty with a pleasant smile. He notes that she is of that age now, and she confirms with a smile that she just turned 16. Lord Roland looks on with a knowing expression, murmuring that he understands. A powerful magical aura flares up around Theo, who remains silently seated at his desk. Lord Roland asks if she understands that a debut means she'll be seen as a marriage candidate, and she confirms she does. He covers his mouth to stifle a laugh. Much to her confusion, Patty clarifies with a smile that she's only considering marriage if a decent person comes along, and Roland acknowledges her point. A dark aura surrounds Theo's furious face as someone points out that he's frowning, and he begins to retort. Leaning toward her, he angrily demands to know what's more important to her, her master or marriage. Blinking in surprise at his outburst, Patty timidly asks, "Yes?" Lord Roland smirks and remarks on her answer, while Patty looks flustered by the escalating situation. Theo grits his teeth, barely containing his frustration. Patty formally requests extended leave to prepare for her debut, but Theo immediately shuts her down, denying the request. She pushes back, reminding him that her contract explicitly entitles her to take leave. He counters that it can also be denied depending on the palace's workload. She challenges his excuse, pointing out that they aren't busy right now, as he looks away thoughtfully. With a smug look, Theo claims they will be busy soon, leaving her to wonder what he's planning. She internally panics, wondering how her simple desire to debut spiraled into such a complicated mess. Lord Roland cheerfully intervenes, suggesting they all get back to work and deal with the issue later. His anger subsiding, Theo looks at her with a serious expression and quietly asks if she wants to get married. Holding a book, she glances over her shoulder as she walks away, leaving his question unanswered. She allows herself a small, private smile. Lost in thought, she admits to herself that this isn't about marriage. She simply wants the experience of a debut. Remembering her family's past suffering, she feels this is something she must do for her past self as well. Watching her go, Theo sits back down and quietly acknowledges her unspoken feelings. Lord Roland walks with Patty down a quiet, ornate hallway. He breaks the silence, asking her directly if she has any feelings for His Majesty. She insists she respects him deeply as her master, but Roland accuses her of pretending not to understand his true meaning. She believes Theo is only interested in her because he's projecting his feelings for his lost first love, Patricia, onto her. Frustrated, she asks Roland what he expects her to say, reminding him she has no desire to become queen. She points out that he himself warned her not to aim for the position, prompting a knowing smile from him. He now finds her more interesting than he expected and muses that she would actually make a compelling queen. He laughs heartily at her surprised expression, and she wonders why he's suddenly changing his tune. As they walk on, he argues that no one else could handle being queen besides her. A narrator explains that while the palace atmosphere has improved, no noble ladies dare to get close to Theo. A flashback shows a maid violently vomiting blood after getting too close, the narration attributing it to his overpowering magic. A regal but imposing Theo stands alone, shadowed by the ever-present fear of death that surrounds him. Patty sadly concludes that immense power only leads to profound loneliness. Waving goodbye, Lord Roland says he's heading to the manor and adds that he would welcome the idea of her becoming queen. Her imagination runs wild with a romantic image of Theo gently holding her in an elegant gown. Wah! She snaps back to reality, blushing furiously and looking annoyed with herself. She questions her own thoughts as she opens the door to her room, fretting that staying in the queen's quarters is making things worse. The scene transitions to an imposing view of a grand estate under the night sky. In a candlelit hall, Lord Roland expresses his surprise that someone has come all this way to see him. With a cynical gaze, he concludes that she must be incredibly desperate to seek him out. A regal woman in a dark cape is introduced as the Queen Dowager. The Queen Dowager scoffs, remarking that she's heard he's still pretending to be a loyal servant to that monster. Roland smirks, assuring her that he's been working hard to earn the Emperor's trust. He reminds the Queen Dowager that he has been a valuable source of information for her. She turns away dismissively, stating she only came to give him a reminder. As she walks away, she warns him not to get attached to the monster, and he coolly agrees that it would never happen. Gnawing on her thumb, the Queen Dowager resolves that they must eliminate that thing at any cost. She notices something amiss, commenting on his hair. He apologizes, blaming a hectic schedule, and promises to fix it immediately. Standing firm, he reaffirms their shared secret. No one must ever discover he carries royal blood, and he obediently addresses her as mother. A playing card bearing his likeness appears as he declares himself her final trump card. The scene shifts to Patty's father, who holds up a sketch of a pink gown and asks for her opinion. While her family discusses the need for an elegant and refined debut dress, Patty sits quietly, watching the preparations unfold. She reflects on taking another day off from the palace to be with her family. She notes that both her father and brother are working tirelessly to ensure her debut is perfect. A look of quiet contemplation crosses her face as she takes it all in. Back at the palace, she cheerfully informs Theo that she'll be going home again on the weekend to continue with her preparations. Theo lets out an audible, annoyed sigh, clearly displeased with her announcement. She calmly tells the pouting emperor that his childish behavior won't work on her. He leans in close, their faces just inches apart as she looks back at him, unflinching. In a soft, romantic moment, he gently touches her cheek, causing her to look up in surprise. A charming, knowing smile spreads across his face. He pats her head, playfully asking who the childish one is now, which makes her blush. Wah! She jumps back in a fluster, insisting he stop, because she's a proper lady now. Theo freezes in shock at her reaction while she realizes she's the only one he's so comfortable and casual with. She grimaces, wondering if they're both just bad at keeping an emotional distance due to their shared past. Back home and trying on a dress, Patty admits she's having trouble choosing a design for her debut. She glances toward her father and brother for guidance. Overcome with adoration, her father and brother agree to whatever she wants. Thump. The doors suddenly burst open, startling everyone in the room. Patty and her family turn in surprise towards the sudden intrusion. The three of them stare in disbelief, her brother asking what is happening. As they gaze at the new arrival, Patty stammers in astonishment. A stunning white and blue debutante gown, complete with a magnificent turquoise necklace, is presented before them. A matching jeweled choker is also revealed in an elegant box. Patty recognizes it as a debutante gown, her face flushing with surprise. Her father and brother slump in defeat, fuming at this unexpected development. She watches the man who brought the dress bow apologetically to her family. She realizes this is Theo's power play, a message to her family not to overstep after their treatment of Patricia. Seeing their crestfallen expressions, she feels a part of herself starting to accept them again. With a clever smile, she points out that while the dress is lovely, it doesn't include a headpiece or shoes. Her bright, genuine smile radiates warmth and forgiveness. Moved by her kindness, her father and brother look on with tears welling in their eyes. Her brother comments on the extravagance of the gifts, assuming her palace work must be very demanding. Her father stares at his son in disbelief, asking if he actually believes that simplistic explanation. A smug Theo seems to relish his victory, while a tiny, confused Patty is left in the middle of it all. Having returned to the palace, Patty formally thanks Theo for her time off, and he acknowledges her with a simple right. Continuing her thanks, Patty adds with a smile that there's something else. Theo listens with his eyes closed, taking in her words. She hesitates slightly before continuing, a small blush on her cheeks. She then bursts into a bright, happy laugh, expressing her genuine gratitude. A warm, gentle smile spreads across Theo's face as he tells her he's glad. The scene shifts to the royal palace's grand hall, filled with nobles for a debutante ball. Dressed in her stunning debut gown, Patty makes her entrance, escorted by her proud father and brother. Walking with her father, she observes the other young women, thinking they must all be there for their debuts as well. As two other noble ladies notice her elegant arrival, Patty muses on how young and innocent everyone seems. A sudden, powerful aura of shock radiates through the room as all eyes fix on her and her family. Patty looks around in confusion, startled by the sudden, intense attention. She realizes everyone is staring at her dress and admits to herself that it's far too extravagant for a count's daughter. Deciding it's best not to draw more attention, she thinks she should probably stay off to the side. She shares a reassuring smile with her father as they proceed. Suddenly, she and her family look forward with expressions of surprise and apprehension. Her elegant gown flows as she stands, waiting to see what has caused the commotion. She notes with confusion that the king has arrived far too early for a party intended to greet him. A wave of shock and murmuring spreads through the assembled nobles. As the crowd parts, she stands beside her father, wondering what on earth is happening. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she utters, "No way!" Emperor Theo makes his grand entrance, dressed in a magnificent white and blue formal suit. Staring at his perfectly coordinated attire, she questions why their outfits are matching. They stand facing each other from across the hall, a perfectly matched pair in the eyes of the entire court. In a moment of dawning horror, she realizes she's been completely set up. She imagines feigning innocent surprise, but knows she could never get away with it. A smug Theo seems to mock her internal monologue with a declaration of, "No way!" Feeling guilty, Patty apologizes to her father and brother, who look utterly defeated by the Emperor's power play. Theo gracefully extends his gloved hand toward her. He formally asks her if she would grant him a dance. The onlooking nobles, including her father, are completely stunned by the Emperor's direct request. Internally, Patty panics, wanting to refuse to avoid fueling rumors, but ultimately feels she has no choice but to accept. With a gracious smile, she accepts his offer with pleasure. As she places her hand in his, she's surprised to feel that his hand is shaking. A soft smile touches her lips as she realizes that despite his calm facade, he's nervous. The orchestra begins to play as the two prepare to dance. Theo and Patty take center stage, becoming the sole focus of the entire ballroom as they begin their waltz. While they dance, she looks up at him and asks why he went to such great lengths to arrange this. Holding her close, he gazes down and softly calls her cruel. Confused by his response, she silently questions his meaning. Lost in thought, she wonders what it is that Theo truly wants from her. A tiny, comical version of herself fumes, insisting that she is the true victim of his tyranny. As the dance concludes, she gracefully curtsies before him. Theo smiles warmly while Patty shoots him an annoyed but resigned glance. Brushing off the complex emotions, she nonchalantly claims she's generally good at physical activities anyway. He affirms her statement with a knowing and affectionate smile. The noble ladies gossip in hushed tones, shocked to see His Majesty laughing so joyfully and wondering about his deep favor for Lady Alvin. A reflection in a mirror shows a memory of her being playfully casual with a younger Theo, making her realize their dynamic has been informal for years. Because of their history, she admits she'd forgotten that he was the king, a figure with godlike authority. Looking up at him with newfound clarity, she offers a genuine, radiant smile. The scene transitions to later, with Theo now seated on his throne, and aides standing by his side. Another young woman in a flowing purple gown ascends a grand staircase, observed by a group of ladies below. From the crowd, Patty's red hair stands out as she observes the other nobles mingling at the ball. As expected, she stands completely alone, realizing that no one dares to approach her now. She recalls her father and brother's comical, overprotective glares that have been warding everyone off the entire time. She understands that no man would dare approach a lady so publicly favored by the Emperor. Realizing her chances of finding a partner have just been eliminated. Clenching her fist in fury, she internally curses that bastard Theo for his master plan. She reflects on her conflicting emotions, admitting that while she's angry, she doesn't hate it, leaving her utterly confused. She overhears that the Marquis family's greeting is over, realizing with a start that her family is next. Patty stands patiently on the red carpet, waiting for her family's turn to greet the Emperor. With a serious and resolved expression, she prepares to face the throne. Spotting Theo's smug smile and Roland's equally cheerful one, she glares and vows to remember this later. With graceful composure, she gives a slight formal bow before the Emperor. She glances around, wondering why all the other nobles are strangely keeping their heads down. As a wave of unease washes over her, she admits to herself that she has a very bad feeling about this. He's too close. Her mind screams in panic at their sudden lack of distance. Tense and sweating, she looks up at him as she silently offers her formal greeting. With a warm, gentle expression, Theo looks down at her and tells her she's beautiful. Caught completely off guard by the public compliment, She stares at him in stunned disbelief. Her mind reels as she wonders if he has any idea what a declaration like that means in front of the entire court. Panicked, she glances at the gossiping nobles and realizes the entire social circle might now think she's Theo's lover. Theo simply replies to her greeting by stating that he is honored. Confused by his cryptic response, she looks at him sharply and asks what he means. Well, her hand nervously clutches her dress as she hesitates. She sadly wonders if he's just projecting his unrequited feelings for her past self, Patricia, onto her. In a moment of frustration, she complains that thanks to him, she'll never be able to get married. A shadow crosses Theo's face as he internally questions why she's still saying such things. He leans in close, holding her arms, as he intensely asks if she truly wants to get married that badly. Before she can answer, he gently takes her gloved hand in his. He then lifts her hand to his lips and places a gentle kiss upon it. The entire ballroom watches in stunned silence as the Emperor kneels before her. She panics, thinking, here of all places, what on earth is he doing? Holding her hand, Theo looks up at her with a soft, confident smile, completely unfazed by the audience. Back in her room, an emotionally and physically drained Patty collapses face first onto her bed. Lying on her pillow, she reflects on the evening, thinking that was quite the situation. She recalls how her father and brother were still completely shell-shocked even after they returned home. Thinking of their tearful regrets over her fate, a small, knowing smile touches her lips. The narration explains that while her rank as a count's daughter is too low for a queen, her constant proximity to Theo makes her unattainable for any other man. Lying awake in bed, she stares at the ceiling with a troubled expression, contemplating her future. No. She sits bolt upright, realizing this isn't just about marriage, it's about him making her queen, a thought she vehemently rejects. The memory of his kiss on her hand flashes through her mind, causing a deep blush to spread across her face. I don't want to go back to work. She buries her face in her pillows, kicking her feet in frustration. Peeking over her pillow, she blushes while thinking about what being queen would actually mean for her life. She imagines waking up and falling asleep next to him every day. She then pictures eating every meal and working alongside him as part of her daily routine. Wait, it suddenly dawns on her that her life is already like that now, aside from sharing a bed. Stunned, she wonders if this was Theo's plan from the very beginning, though she tries to dismiss the idea. But Theo, clenching her fist, her expression hardens with new resolve as she thinks of him. The next day, having made her decision, she prepares to board the carriage back to the palace as her family sees her off. As a hand reaches down to help her into the carriage, a familiar voice calls out her nickname, Patty. Her father tearfully suggests they abandon their titles and flee to another kingdom for her sake. She thinks with resolve that her family will no longer sacrifice their happiness just to protect themselves. Touched, she wonders if they are truly ready to throw everything away for her. Overwhelmed with emotion, she gives a gentle, heartfelt smile as she takes her father's hand. Patty assures her worried father and brother that His Majesty is a kind person, though they remain unconvinced. With a final, bright smile, she departs, full of renewed purpose. The scene transitions to the grand, sunlit palace where she works. Back in her chambers, she begins to unpack her belongings by her bed. A maid greets her with a smile, and Patty thanks her politely. Patty hesitantly asks the maid if she has heard any rumors about her. The maid cheerfully confirms she heard His Majesty proposed, causing Patty to groan in embarrassment. She worries that a king proposing to a former orphan will be bad for Theo's reputation. When the maid suggests the proposal feels like it's been a long time coming, Patty shouts in shock. The maid explains they've always treated her as the future queen, leaving Patty utterly stunned. She realizes with a jolt that everyone's behavior did change after she moved into the queen's chambers. A tiny, furious version of herself laments that Theo's plan was already complete before she even noticed. Now dressed in her maid uniform, she peeks shyly into Theo's office. She enters the room to find Roland waiting by an ornate golden chair. Roland greets her cheerfully, commenting on the excitement of the previous day. Noting his good mood, she points out how happy he seems, and he thanks her and the Emperor for his enjoyable days. Getting serious, she asks Lord Roland what he honestly thinks of the situation. He smiles warmly and tells her he thinks it's great, believing she and the Emperor are a perfect match. Leaning in with a smirk, he teases her, asking if she's worried she's just a stand-in for his first love. Flustered and annoyed, she inwardly curses his terrible personality. Just then, a stern-looking Theo enters the office doorway. Roland and Patty both turn in surprise at the Emperor's sudden appearance. With a menacing glare, Theo slowly utters Roland's name. Roland comically makes a hasty retreat, announcing that The meddler will now excuse himself. Startled by his sudden exit, Patty is left momentarily speechless. She turns in a panic toward Theo, begging him not to leave her. Utterly flustered by his presence, she nervously responds to his unspoken question. He moves intimidatingly close, his intense gaze making her blush and sweat. Leaning in, he whispers that it looks like she's finally started to see him as a man. Overwhelmed by his proximity, her face flushes as she listens to his words. A promotional advertisement for the webcomic platform is displayed. He calls out her name as she clutches her head, looking distressed. He leans close again, whispering that it looks like she's finally started to see him as a man. Annoyed that he's using an informal tone now, she thinks he is incredibly cunning. He gently asks if she has reached a decision after thinking about it overnight. A memory of his formal proposal flashes in her mind. Facing him, she hesitates, struggling to find the right words. She weighs her options, realizing that refusing the king means she'd likely have to flee the country. Looking at him, she recognizes he's not commanding her, but genuinely asking what she wants. Recalling all the times he has cared for her, she admits she truly likes him. Her expression hardens with determination as she makes her choice. As he waits for her answer, Theo turns his head away, a faint blush on his cheek. She's surprised, thinking to herself that it's rare for Theo to be the first to look away. As she watches his solemn profile, she feels a sudden pang of understanding. She thinks of their shared history, realizing their bond is more than just friendship. Looking up at him with newfound resolve, she asks him to give her a little more time. Looking up at him with a gentle smile, she promises to seriously consider him and their future together. A slight blush on his cheeks, Theo agrees, encouraging her to think about him as much as she wants. As she stumbles back, he catches her, holding her face gently as he declares he's not holding back anymore. Blushing furiously, she panics internally, thinking he's gotten far too close. Stunned into silence, she stares at him as he tenderly takes her hands in his. Surrounded by an aura of purple roses, Theo brings her gloved hand to his lips for a soft kiss. Comically steaming, she wonders what happened to the innocent, charming Theo she once knew. He looks down at her with a confident, knowing smile, clearly enjoying her flustered reaction. She slaps her own cheeks, telling herself to stay focused and not get swept away by his charms. Turning away with forced professionalism, she announces that for now, they should just get back to work. PF'd Theo stifles a laugh, realizing she's trying to play it cool. She opens the door with a glare, only to find Lord Roland collapsed on the floor. Enraged, she demands to know what Roland is doing, and he admits with a blush that he was eavesdropping because they're too entertaining. The three of them are now hard at work in the library, surrounded by massive stacks of documents. As she writes, she reaffirms her true purpose, reminding herself that she always wanted to work for Theo. With renewed focus, she puts her job first, believing that busyness can sometimes save the heart. She maintains a calm and focused expression as she continues her work. Her eyes widen slightly as she notices something, a curious, "Oh," escaping her thoughts. Standing up, she smirks, thinking to herself that it seems some prey has been caught in the trap. She bids Theo and Roland goodnight, reminding them not to overwork as she heads out for the day. Theo watches her leave with a serious expression, acknowledging her departure. Stepping over a glowing magical grid, she reveals the cloaked intruders caught within the magic-infused traps she set around the palace. Clang! Crack! She swiftly disarms the intruders, landing gracefully with a satisfied thought that her power is justice. With a small, key-like object, she seems to dispel a magical barrier. A man in a dark military uniform is introduced as Marquisate Army Officer Ignacio. Ignacio was Theo's sword-fighting instructor, and is part of a loyal faction within the army. Ignacio asks if she's really not going to tell the Emperor, but she insists Theo would just scold her endlessly, and decides to credit the royal guard instead. He looks away sheepishly, admitting it feels wrong to steal her credit. Holding a rope, she suggests with a sly smile that they tie up the intruders first. She gives a confident, slightly blushing smile, pleased with her work. She entrusts the rest to Ignacio, who waves goodbye as he stands over the now-bound intruders. Later that night, she lies restlessly in her bed, a small dagger placed on her nightstand. She dreams of a romantic moment, with Theo holding her lovingly in a garden of roses. She awakens with a start, blushing and flustered by the vivid dream. Startled by a noise, she turns her attention toward the window. A small, cute bird with a blue ribbon and a scroll on its leg is perched by her window. She recognizes it instantly, realizing it looks just like a bird Theo cared for as a child. Looking closer, she spots a scroll tied to its leg and wonders if it's a letter. A promotional advertisement for the webcomic platform is displayed. As she opens the window, the little bird hops onto her arm. Chirp! The bird gently presents the sealed letter to her in the palm of her hand. Cradling the bird, she remarks on how similar it looks to the one Theo once picked up. A flashback shows her and a young Theo caring for a small bird, but she dismisses it, thinking that was over a decade ago. She gently asks the bird if it's His Majesty's familiar, and it responds with a happy chirp. Realizing Theo modeled it after their cherished bird, she smiles, thinking he's a sentimental man as it nuzzles her finger. She recalls how Theo left the original bird behind when he went to war, knowing he might not come back. Back in the present, she finds it odd to receive a letter when they had just seen each other. She holds the letter in her hand, saying it's formally addressed to Lady Patti Alvain. With the bird perched on her shoulder, she opens the letter and smiles, admiring Theo's elegant handwriting. A flashback shows a silver-haired man telling her that her handwriting is full of energy. Confused, she wonders if it was a compliment. Reading the letter, she sees Theo apologize for the surprise and explain that he asked Roland how to court her. She imagines a mischievous Roland, making up the advice to write letters in sighs, realizing Theo actually believed him. As Theo admits in the letter that it's his first time and he didn't know what to say, she thinks he's already made a mistake. When the letter pivots to thanking her for everything, she stifles a laugh, completely caught off guard. He thanks her for waking him up, saying her energy makes him feel lucky to be alive, which she finds a bit heavy for an opening. He continues, explaining that food tastes better, and work feels more meaningful just by having her around. Blushing as she reads, she's stunned to realize he's actually writing a genuine love letter. As a memory of him writing with a gentle smile appears, she reads his final, heartfelt plea, "Stay by my side like this forever." Overwhelmed, she clutches the letter to her heart with a deeply touched expression. She recalls his recent advances, the intense stare, the kiss on her hand, feeling flustered by his multifaceted approach. A tiny version of herself panics, wondering how to reply and lamenting her inexperience with romantic relationships. With a thumping heart, she studies the letter again, suddenly wondering if there's more she missed. She discovers the rest of the letter is an invitation to accompany him on a work inspection, causing her to faceplant on her desk. Lying defeated, she can't believe he ended such an emotional letter with a work assignment. With a sigh, she straightens up, deciding that she really should write him a reply. After a moment of thought, she smiles warmly and begins to write her response with a quill. Later, Theo reads her reply in his office, a wide, pleased smile spreading across his face. Roland enters, interrupting his moment by asking what's with the creepy smile that's weirding him out. Theo happily announces that he's received a reply from Patti, holding up her letter for Roland to see. Reminding Roland that writing letters was his idea, Theo is met with a blank, confused, "Huh?" In a flashback, Theo recalls asking Roland for advice on approaching someone, to which Roland casually suggested starting with letters. Realizing the consequences of his offhand advice, Roland is shocked that Theo actually wrote to Patti, which Theo confirms. Wahasai. Roland erupts in uncontrollable laughter as an annoyed Theo looks on, pleading for someone to save him. After composing himself, Roland asks what Theo wrote, and Theo explains it was about his gratitude in an inspection tour. Roland notes that it sounds like business communication and asks for her reply. Theo says she just acknowledged the work trip. Ahahaha. Roland collapses in laughter again, as Theo tries to insist there was more to it. Theo glares, his patience clearly wearing thin, as Roland continues to laugh at his expense. Roland reflects on how good a boss Theo is, thinking he'd have been executed for such behavior under the previous king. The scene reveals a portion of her letter, where she expresses her gratitude and thanks him for letting her stay by his side. As Theo rereads her heartfelt words, a soft, blushing smile returns to his face. Turning to Roland, Theo confidently asks if he thinks Patti is slowly starting to fall for him. Roland spits out his drink, in utter shock at the Emperor's hopeful interpretation. Wiping his mouth, Roland thinks to himself that His Majesty has become a surprisingly funny man, all thanks to Patti. As Roland cackles by the door, Theo deadpans that it doesn't feel like a compliment, and Roland laughingly confirms it's not. Roland's expression softens as he thinks to himself that, seriously, they are both good people? He reflects that, despite having lives as tragic as his own, neither of them allowed their past to twist them. Bowing his head, Roland feels a pang of sympathy for His Majesty, who is still earnestly studying the letter. The scene shifts to the inspection tour, showing a grand carriage escorted by knights traveling through a sun-dappled forest. Inside the carriage, Theo sits opposite a hooded Patti and Roland on their journey. Patti watches a knight on horseback and wistfully thinks that she wants to ride a horse too. Noticing her gaze, Theo asks what's wrong, and she admits she wishes she were traveling on horseback. A surprised Roland asks if she knows how to ride, causing Patty to realize with a jolt that she's messed up. A cute thought bubble reminds her she's supposed to be a doted-on nobleman's daughter, not a soldier. Trying to cover her slip, she awkwardly explains she only learned the basics as part of her education and has little experience. Theo smiles kindly and offers to teach her some time, an offer which she accepts with a happy, "That'd be wonderful." She celebrates internally, realizing that an order from the king is the perfect excuse to ride again, without her family complaining. Looking at Theo, she fondly recalls riding alongside him in the past and hopes for another long journey together. Memory flashes of them riding freely across a field, ending with the present day. Theo gasping for breath as she teasingly questions his stamina. In the memory, she looks back at him with a brilliant, joyful smile and asks, "But it was fun, wasn't it?" A memory surfaces of a younger Patty and Theo standing together in a windswept, grassy field. Back in the present, she smiles softly, thinking to herself how the memory brings her comfort. Her expression turns wistful as she wonders if Theo, now that he's king, still has that kind of freedom. A close-up reveals Theo's ears have turned bright red, showing he's clearly flustered. Patty smiles gently, thinking that she's happy with her role, even if she's just a stand-in for Patricia. With a serious look, she contemplates whether she should finally tell him who she really is. She looks down at her hands, believing that while it's late, revealing the truth might ease his guilt. She playfully flicks the jewel on his cloak, changing the subject. Theo thinks to himself, "It will?" As a confused, chibi Patty appears beside him, Roland chimes in with a smile, explaining that when she's queen, such outings will become official duties. She sweats nervously, realizing this future is becoming more concrete, and thinks that Theo is quite the schemer. Roland continues his explanation, stating that as king, His Majesty can't cling to a lost love forever. Leaning closer, Roland adds that he finds it agreeable for Theo to raise a young woman who resembles his lost love, much to her annoyance. She internally fumes at being told she's being raised in front of Theo, while a clueless Roland simply asks, "Huh?" Theo completely ignores the tense exchange, lost in his own thoughts. Nay. A sudden cry from the horses startles everyone as the carriage lurches. Theo looks out with concern, wondering what's making the horses so noisy. A massive wave of turquoise energy slices through the forest as Patty's eyes widen, sensing a powerful magical aura. Thrown by the force of the blast, she braces herself for impact. She recognizes the attack, realizing it was created by a magic sword using highly skilled wind magic. Stepping out of the carriage, she sees Theo already standing on the ground below. Fearing for his safety, she thinks that he'll be left all alone and leaps out of the carriage to join him. As she calls out his title, she's shocked to see they've been surrounded by dozens of cloaked figures. Her eyes widen in horror as she realizes they've walked into an ambush. An assailant with a purple tattoo grabs her from behind, pressing a knife to her side. Theo's face contorts with rage, his eyes glowing red as he snarls at her attacker. Her captor reveals that his body has a magical inscription that will cause him to detonate if his heart stops. Gritting her teeth, she realizes the man plans to self-destruct. She understands her captor will take her with him if Theo attacks, and chides herself for being so careless as to become a hostage. Thinking fast, she believes she might be able to survive the blast by creating a magical barrier on her back. An image of her two identities, the capable soldier and the demure lady, appears in a mirror. "Let go of Patty," Theo shouts, his face a mask of fury. Her captor demands Theo drop his sword and dispel his defenses, threatening to kill her otherwise. Theo slowly reaches for the hilt of his sword. Clang! He drops his sword onto the forest floor. The attacker mocks Theo's hesitation, surprised the king would risk himself for a single lady-in-waiting. As Theo's hand moves to dispel his protective barrier, it's clear from his pained expression what he's about to do. He drops his defenses, leaving himself completely vulnerable. Patty stares in wide-eyed shock at his sacrifice. The attacker laughs maniacally, raising his arm as purple energy crackles around it, declaring that it's finally over. A massive orb of destructive purple magic forms, aimed directly at the defenseless Theo. Patty's eyes widen in terror as she recognizes the spell. It's the same one that nearly killed Theo in the town square. She panics, knowing that without his defensive magic, he'll be blown to bits. "Don't resist," her captor warns Theo, pressing the knife tighter against her neck. "The moment you do, this girl dies." Held captive, she frantically wonders if there's anything at all she can do to save him. The scene reveals Roland lying unconscious among the fallen leaves on the forest floor. He lets out a small groan, and it's noted that he appears to still be breathing. A memory resurfaces of Roland telling her that having something precious just means having one more weakness. The massive sphere of dark magic hovers ominously over the unprotected Theo. Patty realizes with dawning horror that her captor is right. She's the one holding Theo back. Her captor stares in disbelief as her red hair ignites with magical energy. Surrounded by a vortex of fire, Patty resolves that she will not be Theo's weakness. With flames erupting around her, she reaffirms her vow never to be a burden to Theo. She unleashes a spinning vortex of fire, sending the cloaked assailants flying. The main attacker lunges with his knife, only to be blocked by her fiery magic. With a swift move, she disarms her captor, the knife spinning through the air. Her former captor collapses to the ground, defeated. Meanwhile, Theo stands calmly as pillars of purple magic descend around him. Gah! Two assailants charge Theo with daggers, cursing in frustration as they attack. Spotting an opportunity, she picks up a discarded dagger from the ground. As she throws it, one of the attackers shouts in shock, realizing it's a magic sword. The dagger, now imbued with her power, curves through the air in a brilliant golden arc. She scoffs, unimpressed, thinking that it's just a weak sword. In the distance, Theo fends off his attackers as Patty spots his sword lying on the forest floor. It's Theo's sword, lying abandoned among the leaves. She grabs the hilt, remembering it's the special sword made by the shopkeeper. She stands back to back with Theo, his sword igniting with her own golden magic. They stand together, a united front against the remaining assassins. Theo's eyes glow a furious demonic red as he glares at their enemies. Gak! Kak! The narration explains that with a single glare, his enemies drop dead instantly. Bathed in light, Patty prepares to strike down the remaining foes with Theo's sword. The battle concludes, leaving them standing together amidst a field of fallen assassins. With the immediate threat gone, Theo turns to look at her with concern. He softly calls her name, Patty. She furiously headbutts him, shouting, You idiot! Grabbing his cloak, she yells at the dazed king, questioning what he was doing and asking if he wanted to die. She angrily reminds him that he's the king and needs to get his priorities straight. Gasp! Startled by her outburst, he immediately apologizes. Overwhelmed with relief, she pulls him into a tight hug. Blushing, he hugs her back and whispers, Captain. She immediately realizes her mistake, thinking that she just yelled at him as if she were his superior officer. As she looks up, she sees Theo smiling down at her with a gentle, knowing expression. Well, I've known for quite some time, actually, he says, leaving her to ask a confused, huh? He asks if he can finally drop the act of not realizing who she is, causing her to shriek, What? She blushes furiously, wondering if he saw her as a grown officer desperately pretending to be a kid. Utterly embarrassed, she hides her face and thinks that he should have told her sooner. Her attention is drawn back to the groaning assassins lying on the ground. Composing herself, she tells the king they need to get the situation under control. Her tactical mind takes over, thinking they must capture the assassins and rescue the knights to strike a blow against the Queen Dowager. She thinks that she shouldn't have called him Theo, while a small chibi version of herself tells a sulking chibi Theo not to make that face. Theo simply looks down with a small, knowing smile. They walk through the aftermath of the battle as knights secure the captured assassins. Together, they survey the scene, the ambush now fully contained. Theo approaches Roland, who is kneeling and bruised, and asks if he's all right. Roland gestures to the dead attacker, reporting that he unfortunately took his own life. Damn it. Patty grits her teeth in frustration, realizing he was likely the most important one. Theo simply says, I see, taking in the news as Roland stands behind them. Roland looks on, his face dirty and bruised, but his expression firm. Having captured the assassins and rescued the guards, they decide to return to the palace, with Patty riding on the same horse as Theo. Riding together after the ambush, Patty thinks about their broken carriage and her unease. Flinch. Theo leans in close, whispering in her ear and making her blush. Theo looks at her with a gentle, sparkling smile. He softly asks her to listen, without getting angry, but she replies that it depends on what he has to say. Sighing, she tells him to just confess what he did, promising she won't get mad. He admits that he anticipated the possibility of an attack during their inspection. She concedes that his foresight makes sense under the circumstances. She grits her teeth, realizing the Queen Dowager played her strongest card and laments that they could have used the captured mage to find her collaborators. Theo apologizes for how things turned out, explaining that he was only trying to protect her. She begs him to stop charging into dangerous situations, and he rests his head on her shoulder, He murmurs that he wishes she understood the pain of the person being protected. Smiling softly, she admits she'd still rush to save him if he ever looked like he was about to get hurt. Blushing, he takes her hand and confesses that her reckless courage is exactly why he can't help but love her. Stunned by his words, she's left speechless as he quickly changes the subject, pointing toward the castle. They ride toward the Grand Palace, their destination now in sight. Wah! After dismounting, Theo sweeps her into his arms, carrying her princess style. As he carries the flustered Patty, a smiling Roland watches them from the palace entrance. Held in Theo's arms, she stares up at him with a look of wide-eyed surprise. He simply gives her a charming and confident smile in return. The scene transitions, filled with a gentle cascade of pink flowers. Later, they are alone in a lavish room where Theo pours them both tea. As he serves her, she fondly recalls him making tea when he was her subordinate, feeling it strange for a king to do so now. Theo earnestly asks if, when they're alone, she could talk to him the way she used to. She agrees, on the condition that he also speaks to her as he normally would. He smiles, suggesting they compare notes and casually calling her Pati. She smiles back warmly, agreeing, and calling him Theo in return. A flashback shows her bleeding and unconscious as she reveals the magic regressed her body to that of a 7-year-old. Curious, she asks if using that magic every time he aged would make him immortal. His expression turns somber as he listens to her question. He explains it was a one-time miracle, only possible because he used all his magic and their powers were abnormally compatible. He soberly concludes that he doubts he could ever perform such a feat again. Staring at her reflection in the tea, she quietly contemplates his words, a miracle. She advises him that it's best to keep her rejuvenation a secret to avoid unnecessary trouble. An image of hands reaching for a divine light illustrates how such a power would undoubtedly cause conflict. She recounts how the Margrave saved her, how Theo was taken in, and how she was placed in a nearby orphanage. She reveals that her own father, seeking to atone for his sins, adopted Pati, who was her spitting image. Listening to her story, Theo grits his teeth, his face filled with pain and anger. She smiles, confessing that as Protée, she was loved far more than she ever could have imagined as Patricia. Theo quietly asks if she ever plans on telling her family the truth. She responds with a firm no, stating that Patricia is already dead. She declares her true revenge, letting her father and brother live with their guilt, never allowing them to forget the wounds Patricia suffered. The heavy conversation concludes, and they sit together in a moment of shared understanding. With a bright and determined smile, she tells him that she is Pati now. Theo looks at her with deep emotion and softly speaks her true name, Patricia. He remarks on the beauty of her name, recalling the time he was hopelessly in love with her. He turns to her with a fond, reminiscent smile, leaving her looking slightly stunned. Patty looks surprised, realizing she never imagined back then that Theo was thinking those things about her. In a flashback, a blushing young Theo learns from a squad mate that everyone already knew about his crush, much to Patricia's confusion. Theo smiles fondly, his heart warmed by the memory. Whoa! Overwhelmed with embarrassment, Patty bows her head and apologizes profusely to Theo for her past obliviousness. She reflects that even if she had known, it's hard to say how she would have responded to his feelings back then. Theo challenges her to a match, confidently boasting that with his current body, he's sure he would win in an instant. Patty proudly reveals she's been secretly training and dealing with assassins, feeling she's getting close to her prime. A dark aura emanates from Theo as he leans in, remarking that this is the first he's hearing of her secret activities. She nervously explains that she even had the captain of the royal guard keep it quiet. Leaning closer on the sofa, Theo tells her she really is something else. Flustered, Patty waves her hands and apologizes, pleading with him not to be mad. He gently takes her hand, silencing her protests. Theo pulls her into his arms, smiling down at her with affection. He whispers into her ear, confessing his love for her. He tells her that from the moment they met until now, he has never stopped thinking of her. Resting her head against his shoulder, she softly agrees. As they embrace, Patty thinks that Theo has given her a treasure she thought she'd never obtain in her life. Looking up at him, she gently asks if he could wait a little longer. She explains that becoming queen is a serious position she can't accept on a whim. Sigh. Theo looks resigned, commenting that she really won't just go with the flow. She thinks to herself that while she's halfway prepared, there are still a few things she needs to do first. Leaning in, she gives him a tender kiss on the forehead. She smiles brightly, declaring that he is her one and only person in this world. Holding his face in her hands, she looks at him with adoration. Pop! Theo's face turns bright red as he freezes in surprise. Patty giggles, delighted by his flustered reaction. A man with gray-brown hair and green eyes watches them from afar, realizing that Patty is actually the famed Lady Patricia. He recalls his investigation into her past, finding it strange that there were no records of her before she entered the orphanage. He muses that it's odd for the king to be so obsessed just because she resembles his first love. The man reflects that the once invincible king has become a mere mortal, a weakness he thought he could exploit. He realizes, however, that what should have been a weakness has instead become a powerful bond between them. A memory flashes of him lying defeated on a forest floor. He thinks the former Queen Dowager must be furious since she ordered him to kill both Theo and Patty. Now then, he smiles slyly as a dark energy gathers in his hand. Watching a vision of the happy couple, he wonders what he should do next. His dark power swirls as he continues to contemplate his next move against Theo and Patty. A smirk spreads across his face as he admits to himself that he's actually having a lot of fun. Elsewhere, Roland observes that His Majesty has become more human, watching as Theo worries over a completely overworked Patty. Roland reflects that he intentionally kept Patty's combat skills a secret from the former queen because he was curious to see what would become of them. He knew that if he had reported the truth, the assassination plot would have succeeded, as Theo would give his life for Patty. Now that her skills will be revealed, Roland decides all he can do is play innocent. He runs a hand through his hair, looking slightly stressed by the complicated situation. A flashback begins, narrated by the green-eyed man who explains his mother fled the ruthless queen while pregnant to secretly give birth. A hooded pregnant woman is shown hurrying through a stone courtyard. The narration reveals he was born with silver hair, a mark of the direct royal line. To protect him, they lived in hiding with his hair dyed a different color. However, his existence was discovered by Marquis Alvarez, an ally of the queen. The young boy and his mother were captured by the Marquis Knights. He was forced to become the Marquis's adopted son and pawn, while his mother was held hostage to ensure his obedience. He recalls the cold treatment he received from the Marquis family, who saw him as nothing more than a tool. In a flashback, Roland recalls getting along with the young, white-haired Prince Theobald, as they were both outsiders in the royal palace. After Theobald was sent to war and all contact was lost, Roland realized that he too would be eliminated if the Marquis family deemed him useless. A political upheaval unfolds as a newly crowned king with light purple hair, holding a scepter, stands before his flag. Roland narrates that only he and Theobald were left with royal blood, and he was given to the former Queen Dowager as a pawn for her revenge. He worried that if His Majesty discovered his ulterior motives, his mother would be killed, or that he himself would be killed first. The flashback ends as Theo, seated on his throne, calmly greets Roland, acknowledging that it's been a while. Roland is taken aback, surprised that the king remembered him. He resolves that, although he has been a pawn, he is not stupid, and will do what he knows is right, defying the Queen Dowager's influence. Looking thoughtful, Roland reflects on the fact that the king is his half-brother. He steels his resolve, knowing that even with his mother held hostage, he must still act. The cruel, white-haired Marquis Alvarez is shown, the man who orchestrated Roland's situation. The scene returns to Theo at his desk, as he declares his intention to make Patty Alvain his queen. Back in the present, Theo casually informs a stunned Patty and an intrigued Roland that he announced their engagement to the council with zero objections. Patty questions his hasty decision, but Theo calmly replies that he is waiting, as they are only engaged for now. Furious, Patty thinks his reasoning is nonsense, as he suggests the engagement can be broken if she wishes. She slams her head on the table in frustration, as Roland notes that the king won't back down once he's decided. Theo simply tells a fuming Patty that it's time for her to prepare herself. Roland watches the scene unfold with an awkward, nervous smile. He lets out a strained laugh as Theo pats a bewildered Patty on the head. Later, Patty reflects on the situation while dressed in her maid uniform. She notes that her life didn't change after the announcement, as everyone in the palace now treats her impending royal status as perfectly normal. A blush of annoyance crosses her face as she realizes this was all part of Theo's calculated plan. She recalls that the only ones truly shocked by the news were her father and brother, who now stand before the throne. Her father pleads with Theo, asking for the longest possible engagement period. He explains their desire to spend more time with her, and Patty realizes it will be hard to return home once she is queen. Theo looks on disdainfully, thinking it's incomprehensible for them to treasure an adopted daughter when they neglected their real one. Her father and brother bow their heads in somber reflection. Smiling gently, Patty surprises everyone by agreeing with her father's request. Her father and brother look up, shocked and moved by her support. Overcome with emotion, they rush forward and pull her into a tight embrace. They look down at her with teary eyes, calling her name in disbelief. From his throne, Theo watches the touching family reunion. After Patty sues him, Theo agrees to their terms, stating the marriage will take place after she turns 18. Standing beside the king, Patty wonders to herself if she made the right choice. She leans against Theo's shoulder, smiling, now certain that her family truly loves her. Seeing their faces feels like an acknowledgement of her past self's suffering, but she knows their mistakes and regret will remain. She muses that while she can't forgive them yet, she might just tell her father the truth on his deathbed. In a beautiful, light-filled scene, Theo kneels before Patty and formally asks her to be his queen. He looks up at her, his eyes filled with adoration and a gentle smile on his face. Patty gazes down at him, her own expression soft and loving. She accepts his proposal without hesitation, saying, "Of course." The two look at each other with deep affection, their faces close. Theo pulls her into his arms for a passionate and loving kiss. They embrace joyfully, heralding the start of her surprisingly happy second life. With a playful smile, Patty tells Theo she has one request for him after his unilateral declaration, and he curiously asks what it is. Theo smiles warmly, anticipating her request. The scene shifts to an outdoor training ground, where Theo adjusts the bracers on his arms. Roland informs the king that he has cleared the area for them, and Theo thanks him for the trouble. Waving goodbye, Roland departs, telling the two to enjoy themselves. Theo watches with a determined gaze as Patty's red hair whips in the wind, ready for their duel. In a sun-dappled glade, Patricia stands revealed in her true adult form, clad once more in her captain's uniform. She tells Theo it's been a while since she's worn her old uniform, and he begins to agree. With a gentle, reminiscent smile, Theo finishes his thought, saying her appearance brings back memories. An image of her past and present selves in the same uniform stands as a testament to time. She playfully nudges him, suggesting he could dress in his old uniform at the palace every day. Weighed down by the heavy titles of the king's fiancée and the next queen, she gives a strained smile. Theo's expression turns somber as he looks down, listening to her concerns. She leans in close, whispering a suggestion into his ear. In a fond memory, she tenderly touches his face, her affection clear. The scene shifts to the Royal Army's training grounds, which they've borrowed for a private sparring session. They stand facing each other on the grounds, ready to begin their duel. Theo asks if she's held a sword since her rejuvenation, and she confirms that she hasn't. She looks up at him with a soft, confident smile. Drawing her sword with a flourish, she declares that in a fight, her only focus is defeating her opponent. He watches her, thinking with a smile that she hasn't changed at all. Theo's fond smile deepens as he observes her familiar fighting spirit. She pumps a fist, proclaiming that a sound body is the source of sound magic. Theo recalls her brutal training regimen, admitting that while a strong body is necessary for magic, he suspects half of it was just for her own amusement. Back in the present, she takes her stance, pointing her sword at him with a challenging smirk. He calmly announces, "Here I come," and with a fierce grin, she eagerly accepts his challenge. Clang. Their swords collide in a shower of sparks, their faces inches apart in the heat of battle. Focusing her energy, she thinks about reinforcing her muscles to increase her power. She lays out her strategy: parry his attacks, find an opening, and let him tire himself out. But she grits her teeth, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She is stunned by his speed as he unleashes a powerful, sweeping attack. Her eyes narrow with intense focus as she prepares to counter his swift assault. With a determined cry, she raises her sword high for a powerful overhead strike. Theo watches her move with a calm and calculating gaze, unimpressed. Their blades clash with incredible force, the impact resonating across the training ground. With a fluid movement, he effortlessly sidesteps her attack, his blade sliding past hers. He smirks, having easily evaded her strongest blow. Her eyes widen in disbelief, a bead of sweat tracing her cheek, as she realizes she's been outmatched. Wah! She collapses to her knees, screaming in utter frustration at her defeat. She admits to herself that while Theo was training, she was being spoiled, and now she's infuriated by the gap in their skills. Theo looks on, slightly taken aback by her dramatic display of frustration. Kneeling before the defeated Patricia, he smiles and says this is the first time he's ever won a point against his captain. Grr! Tears of frustration well in her eyes as she glares at him. He gently takes her gloved hand and brings it to his lips, kissing it softly. He tells her that since he finally won, he deserves a reward, leaving her flustered and confused. His fingers gently caress her cheek, her face flushing a deep red at his touch. He leans in, his face drawing closer to hers as she closes her eyes in anticipation. He pulls her into a tender embrace, whispering softly as she blushes in his arms. Surrounded by a wreath of blooming flowers, he gently kisses her on the neck. He smiles, lost in the moment, thinking that he has waited for this for over 10 years. Held tightly, she looks up with wide, shocked eyes, completely flustered by his affection. The moment deepens, her vibrant red hair seeming to glow as their connection intensifies. A flashback begins with Theo recalling how he joined the military on his father's orders, his own wishes ignored, and was assigned to the 3rd Magic Knight Squad. A younger Theo stands in his new uniform, his expression stoic and distant. He grimly suspects this assignment is a plot to sideline him, likely orchestrated by the Queen. Dismissing the situation as a hassle, he overhears someone complaining about having a female boss, assuming she's just a noble girl waiting for marriage. A younger Theo in his uniform watches as the vibrant red hair of his new captain flows before him. His captain is revealed, a beautiful red-haired woman in a striking uniform, exuding confidence and grace. She formally introduces herself as Patricia Alvain, informing His Highness that she is now his superior officer. Instantly captivated, a blushing Theo wonders to himself if a person can truly be this beautiful. He remains flustered and speechless in her presence. Patricia gives him a charming smile, gesturing with her gloved hands. She playfully cups his blushing face, making him even more flustered. Standing before him, she holds his face gently, her confident demeanor a stark contrast to his shy reaction. A promotional image features a red-haired character with a fierce and determined expression. The flashback deepens, showing a lonely young Theo who believes his life has been nothing to be proud of since birth. He narrates that his mother, a beautiful lady-in-waiting, caught the king's eye. However, weakened by pregnancy and a mana imbalance, his mother tragically lost her life giving birth to him. He recalls that his father's other children, talented princes and princesses, began to disappear one by one as they grew up. A young and somber Theo resigns himself to the belief that he too will eventually be killed. He muses that he only survived because he was a worthless existence, lacking both power and talent. He remembers that in the entire palace, only one of his older sisters ever spoke to him. The memory shifts to a sunlit garden path, where he sits alone on a bench. A kind, dark-haired woman approaches, calling him Theobald and offering him delicious pastries. She is his older sister, a gentle soul with long, dark hair, carrying a basket. As she offers him a treat, he explains that Sister Isabel was despised by the Queen and her other siblings for her plain appearance. While he eats a pastry, Isabel quietly tells him that she is going to leave the palace someday. She smiles sadly, confessing that there is no place for her there. Looking downcast, Theo silently prays that his sister might one day find someone who recognizes her true worth. Isabel looks away, explaining her desire to leave stems from feeling like a meaningless existence, needed by no one. The scene transitions to a grand garden party being held at the royal palace. Noble ladies sit around a table, enjoying wine and conversation amidst the festivities. Theo stands alone on a path, completely isolated from the other guests. He knows no one will speak to him because they all fear getting on the Queen's bad side. Feeling overwhelmed, he runs away, thinking he doesn't want to see anyone. He flees into a quiet, sun-dappled grove of trees. From behind a tree, he cautiously peeks out into the clearing. He spots another boy with light brownish-gray hair sitting alone and decides to approach him. Theo asks what he's doing there, and the boy replies that he doesn't have anywhere else to be. Seeing a kindred spirit, Theo realizes the boy is just like him and asks for his name. The boy introduces himself as Roland Alvarez. Roland explains that although his family is one of the most powerful in the country, he is the child of a mistress, so nobody wants to associate with him. Theo finds a strange coincidence, revealing he's also an outcast as the 3rd prince from a different mother. Roland is surprised to learn he's speaking to His Highness Theobald. Roland smiles warmly, suggesting that since they are both outcasts, they should hang out together. Overjoyed, Theo breaks into a rare, genuine laugh and agrees that he likes that idea. A memory shows the two boys playfully sparring with sticks. In another memory, they sit together peacefully, finding comfort in their shared solitude. Their friendship blossoms as they spend more time together, sharing smiles and laughter. After Roland trips and falls, Theo rushes to his side with concern, asking if he's okay. Roland looks down at his scraped and bloodied knee. Theo observes that while the wound looks painful, Roland isn't gonna cry. He reaches out, and a brilliant golden light emanates from his hand as he uses healing magic. Whoa! Roland stares in awe, remarking that he's never seen healing magic work so fast. Theo looks down, sadly, explaining that his magic is considered meaningless, because it can't be used to attack, which is why everyone makes fun of him. Roland is the first to spot the approaching woman, calling out in recognition, Lady Isabel. Isabel approaches Theo, explaining she was worried when she couldn't find him and calling him a handful. She smiles kindly, realizing that he was just playing with a new friend. Taking both boys by the hand, Isabel gently tells them it's time to return to the party. As she walks away, Isabel gives the two boys a final wave goodbye. Theo and Roland watch her leave, their expressions turning somber. The scene cuts to the queen, her face cold and severe as she watches the party from afar, surrounded by a thorny aura. Theo reflects that the queen couldn't forgive Isabel's willful behavior, and that his sister left to protect him from the queen's wrath. In a later memory, a stunned Theo is informed that he is being forced to join the military. He narrates that as the only royal in the military, it was an obvious plot to remove him from politics, hoping he would die. Looking downcast, he accepts that he is not needed by anyone and that they simply want him gone. But his life changed when he met his red-haired captain, who boldly cupped his face in her hands. Her confident gaze and touch send his heart racing. Why? The encounter sends a literal shock through his system. His shock echoes across the military grounds as he processes his assignment. Life in the army proved to be incredibly harsh. Theo lies exhausted on the training grounds as other soldiers laugh at him, realizing the drills were harder than he ever imagined. He stands alone, looking utterly dejected and weary from the brutal training. Suddenly, his captain appears beside him, startling him by asking why he looks so unhappy. She flexes, cheerfully talking about her muscles, and he thinks to himself that this woman is completely hopeless. But as he looks at her brilliant, joyful smile, he feels a flicker of something more. She playfully grabs him in a headlock, telling him to turn his brain to muscle, and he yelps in frustration. Held in her arms, he looks up at her beaming, carefree smile. A blushing Theo admits to himself that he doesn't think of her as just an older woman. Posing with him, she radiates confidence while he remains flustered but determined. Walking alone in the courtyard, Theo discovers a small, injured bird on the ground. He gently picks it up, thinking the helpless creature is all alone, just like him. He approaches his captain, explaining that the bird needs to be fed, so he'll be carrying it for a while. She turns and surprises him with a playful smirk, asking if he really thought she'd object. Her expression softens into a warm, gentle smile as she looks down at the tiny bird in the basket. Her unexpected kindness makes his heart flutter and his cheeks flush. He teases her, noting she has a cute side for appreciating a little bird, which makes her laugh. She feigns outrage at his rude comment, and he panics as she raises a gloved fist. Theo recalls that his feelings for her deepened into love after hearing her story, remembering a night she drunkenly celebrated with him. Under the moonlight, she began to tell him her story, starting with how her mother died giving birth to her. She continues, explaining that her family and servants all hate her for it, dismissing it as a pain she can do nothing about. With no place for her at home, she joined the army at just 13 years old. She smiles, confessing that she's happy in the army where people are judged by their abilities. She tells Theo she relates to his situation and wanted him to know that if he works hard, his efforts will be recognized. As a shooting star streaks across the sky, she tells him that while he can't choose his family, he can choose how he lives his life. She notices his sad expression and gently brushes his hair back, telling him not to worry. He blushes at her tender touch, a memory he cherishes. As he watches her walk away, her red hair glowing, he realizes he has finally found his purpose in life. He vows that though he is pathetically weak now, he will one day become strong enough to protect her. This resolve is tested in training, where she easily defeats him in a sparring match. He worries she'll just laugh at him for being younger as he prepares to face her again. With newfound determination, a young Theo readies his sword. She meets his gaze not with mockery, but with a proud and encouraging smile. The flashback ends, showing Theo and Patricia standing together before their assembled squad. Theo narrates that their new mission is nothing short of a death sentence as his squad mates look on in despair. He explains the Queen's ambition, to seize the neighboring kingdom of Arisia. A map reveals Arisia is small but rich in mines, and the Queen plans to invade without a declaration of war, making survival impossible. He foresees his own death, realizing the Queen intends for him to be killed in a sham battle to justify a full-scale war. With grim certainty, he knows the greedy Queen will have the entire Magic Knight Order he loves slaughtered in the process. He's crushed by guilt, believing everyone will die simply because he is there. Whap! Snapping back to reality, Theo looks startled by his own dark thoughts. Later that night, he watches his red-haired captain sitting alone in the quiet courtyard. Lost in thought, he looks downcast and wonders if she too will come to hate him for their doomed mission. He approaches and calls out to his captain, who turns to look back at him. Sitting beside her on a crate, he silently blames himself for their predicament. He glances at her, wondering if she already understands the situation and is staying silent for his sake. His hand clenches his uniform as he considers confessing his feelings before the end. He debates confessing, so he can die without regrets, but her voice echoes in his mind, telling him to come back alive. Her words strike a chord, and he looks up with newfound realization. He decides he cannot give up yet. He must survive and come back alive. Recalling how seeing her wear the ribbon he gave her gave him courage, he resolves to return and finally tell her his feelings. But his hope is shattered as he narrates that reality was not so kind. While kneeling over a fallen comrade on a desolate battlefield, with blood on his face and tears in his eyes, he vows to do something about it as golden healing magic emanates from his hand. A brilliant flash of golden power erupts from his outstretched hand. The radiant, sparkling light intensifies, flooding the battlefield with its warmth. Theo awakens with a start, finding himself lying in an unfamiliar bed. A brown-haired man in a military uniform greets him as Theo, disoriented, asks where he is. The man explains he's in the Resendez-Margrave's territory, right near the border his squad was ordered to attack. Theo realizes the Margrave leads the anti-Queen faction, understanding the Queen planned the war to use this territory as a shield. He bolts upright in bed, frantically asking for the whereabouts of Captain Patricia. The man delivers the grim news. Besides His Highness, there are no survivors. Overwhelmed by grief and horror, Theo clutches his head and lets out a silent, anguished scream. The story is to be continued.